time for Think, Change, Repeat. And now, the host of Think, Change, Repeat, Ashley.
Good evening, everybody. Today is Thursday, July the 2nd, 2026, on the eve of the 250th anniversary of July 4th. This is another episode of Think, Change, Repeat. I'm their host today, Ashley, and with me I have a very special guest, Yona Aniwodi is here with us today, and we are going to be discussing Appalachian culture and Native Americans and many different issues that are associated with all of that. And we already have another show planned to get into some cultural issues, but today we're going to have a little bit of a history lesson from Yona. I'm very excited, and welcome, Yona. How are you?
Osta Shunigad, Osionigana. Greetings to everyone. I'm doing great, and thanks for having me on the show. It's really when you think about where we live and how history is taught to us and how culture is taught to us here in America. It's always been different for me because of my perspective and having the, in particular with Salagdawanahiste or Cherokee language being a written language. There's so much history and knowledge to refer to that's pre-Columbian, prior to the conquest of what we call Amayetlidoxi, or the Turtle Island. When, for example, when Patuxent, Massachusetts was renamed Plymouth Rock by William Bradford's party aboard the Mayflower, and when Janacomaca was renamed Virginia in honor of Queen Elizabeth by the Jamestown party in 1607. And so I think that would be an appropriate time really to kind of begin our little story here about the across the river people.
Yes.
Because that's what the main focus of tonight's little history chinwag, as my British friends would say, is talking about and dear God, don't call it Appalachia. Some people say Appalachia. It's Appalachia. Or, if you say Appalachia, I'll throw in Appalachia. There you go. Anyways.
Usually, Yona, I say Appalachian, but I say Appalachia for some reason. So I'll reframe that.
So
but
people,
yes.
I've heard both, but it's actually Appalachia, and it comes from Appalachia. And so, in fact, the first encounter in the Southeast United States with Europeans was, obviously not the English speakers that arrived at Jamestown and Plymouth Rock, which would be on Massachusetts Bay. Massachusetts is the little hill country, and that's Wampanoag. We say Massachusetts today. But anyways, prior to that, of course, in October 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue, and he would end up meeting Wakanagari, chief of the cacique of the Taino tribe. And you had the Lucayan and Taino tribes there around the Leeward and Wayward Islands there, the Antilles. We're talking about the Caribbean. Later, the Spanish would actually land conquistadores, or conquerors, on mainland North America itself. The first to do so was who really made quite an impact was De Soto. Of course, Ponce de Leon is more famous for founding of St. Augustine and looking for the Fontana de Juventud, or the Fountain of Youth. But after Juan Ponce de Leon just mainly stayed around Florida. And of course, just to the north, they had the Okefenokee swamp, dismal swamp area, and virtually impassable. That's why they really didn't go much further north. It wasn't until one of his own privateers, Juan Pardo, went further north as far as Charleston, South Carolina. And that laid the groundwork for De Soto expedition. And so Hernan de Soto was the first one to actually come through the Smoky Mountains and Tennessee. And he described this Coosa kingdom. And it's funny today because historians today scratch their heads about what happened to the Coosa kingdom and the Coosa people. Well, in Cherokee, Aniwodi refers to the Creek or Muskogee people. They didn't go extinct. They didn't vanish or disappear. In fact, the Muskogee and the Creek were still predominantly all across the southeast United States up until the early 1830s, when the Indian Removal Act of 1830 was enforced by General Fuss and Feathers Winfield Shreve at the command of Andrew Jackson, despite the Supreme Court ruling against them. But I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. So after the De Soto expedition, where De Soto would end up going all the way down to the mouth of Mobile Bay or Mobile, and he fought a Tuscaloosa or Tuscaloosa, the great black warrior who actually mortally wounded De Soto, and he kind of stumbled all the way over toward Pine Bluff, Arkansas, where he died. And I think just one or two rafts were lashed together of the last survivors of his original landing force, which was in the thousands. And I think not even a dozen managed to float out to the Gulf and make it back. There were 3 or 4 failed Spanish expeditions into the southeast United States. That's why we're speaking English today. So not much after that, the Cherokee and other tribes here in Appalachia began to encounter, after a few expeditions of the Spaniards. Then came Jacques Cartier, Pierre Champlain, Le Marquis de La Salle, Pierre Marquette, all the coureurs de bois with their drapeau de fleur-de-lis, the French coming from Quebec and from the Fleuve Saint-Laurent, St. Lawrence Seaway. And so really the first foreign language that was ever taken on by the Algonquins and Iroquoian tribes and languages was French. I'm saying foreign language because most tribes also spoke Mobilian, which was a combination of different Mississippian languages along with Plains Sign Language. And
Yona, I'm sorry to interrupt you here. I hope I'm not interrupting your flow, but can you establish for us during this time, because I think that it's easy for somebody like me who is not as educated about this stuff to think that there's like a handful of Native American tribes in the East Coast region. Can you talk to us about how many different tribes were in that area in the Appalachian Mountain region and just like the East Coast in general? Because there's a huge amount of diversity, and you don't have to get there now, but just when you do, if we can.
Well, in particular, because the Appalachian Mountains are, the eastern continental divide between the Mississippi Valley and the East Coast, it formed a huge geographic obstacle to further conquering of the land by whoever won the race. And of course, at this point, chronologically, we're around the mid 1500s. We've just had a few first contacts with the Spaniards. Now we're getting a few first contacts with the French. And so now at this point, it's a really good time to take a snapshot of, okay, what's going on? Well, at this point, Europeans sailing along the coast, more ships begin to pour in, and they're slaver ships, they're slave catchers. So any Indians that they see running up and down the beach, they're throwing nets over them, dragging them aboard ship, taking them as slaves. Most coastal communities like Quahogs, Wampanoags up along the northeast coast, Geechees, Lumbees, Calusas, other Temecula's, other tribes. I'm going from like Chincoteague, Assateague, Chesapeake, down all the way to the Florida East Coast. They were raided because they're right on the Atlantic coast. There was also the Fall Line Road, which was, you have to understand, there was a major, major trade road that basically ran from Manhattan Island across Trenton, Philadelphia, Philadelphia, Wilmington, Baltimore, DC, Richmond, and then cutting across through like Raleigh, Greensboro, down through Atlanta to like Hattiesburg, Mississippi, and then over to Natchez, Mississippi. That's a really, really ancient, it's called the Fall Line Road, the Fall Line Trail. And so there were tribes packed along that, different tribes, because there was so much trade in smaller inland tribes. You have to understand, at that time, there were so many smaller tribes that in terms of mutual defense and language and culture, most smaller tribes were all grouped together into confederacies. So, for example, if we now fast forward and go to the 1600s, move this along, when they arrive at Jamestown and they meet Matoaka, daughter of Wehun Sanaka, that would be Pocahontas, daughter of the chief of the Powhatan Confederacy. He's sometimes called Chief Powhatan, but his name is Wehun Sanaka. He was chief of the Powhatan Confederacy, which includes the Paspaheghs, the Croatans, the Assateagues, Chincoteagues, Chesapeake, a number of different tribes were all under the Powhatan Confederacy. And they, in fact, referred to Cherokee as Rickahanics. We were called Rickahanics in their language, means cave people. Chalagi or Chalaki is Coosa or Creek for cave people. All the neighboring tribes called us cave people in their languages. That's not the Cherokee term. The term in Cherokee for Cherokees, Aniyanwiya, or people with principle. And obviously, if you look at the Cherokee Nation, most of central Appalachian region, all the way to the southern extent of Appalachia, was all within the Cherokee Nation. The eastern boundary of Appalachia roughly follows the proclamation line of 1763. And so it wasn't until there was a private named Timberlake, possibly an ancestor to Justin Timberlake. But I guess he was the first one to bring the sexy from England over the mountain to Tennessee. Private Timberlake.
Yes, I think you're right about that. That's a very good observation.
And then Justin brought it back. But anyways, Timberlake described and made drawings of Echota and the neighboring capital town of Tennessee. And Tennessee became Tennessee, Utanasi, which means big wasp nest, or Tansi, Kanadagi, Turkey land, turkey roost, Kentucky. But when Timberlake met with the Cherokee, he was a British soldier, and made a diary and everything. Was it Henry J. Timberlake? I think Private Henry Timberlake. And then you saw Cuming then come over from the Carolinas after the Timberlake expedition with the Cherokee to and Sir Cuming was of the House of Lords, and he was the one that actually gathered together the 7 Cherokee chiefs, and led by Okon Stota and Old Hop and Atakulakula, and 7, because there's 7 maternal clans in the Cherokee, and so there was a chief from each clan. Kind of like think Knights of the Round Table, equal rule.
Yes,
and horizontal rule, it's not top down. It's
right.
shared horizontal rule.
More of a community. And that's something too, and maybe this is a little bit off topic, but that's something that when I was living in Syracuse, it's really important because there is a large Native American population in that area as well.
That's Iroquois land. That's the 6 Iroquois tribes are there, based out around Syracuse.
Yes, and they called it the 7 nations. So I guess okay, I thought it was a 7, but I thought it was where it was other tribes besides the Iroquois were also meeting, and this could be considered the birthplace of democracy. But
yes,
but anyway, I don't want to get you off track, but basically to say that yes, these groups coming together in these areas were really important for setting this, for setting the stage and for working together.
Well, in fact, the Iroquois Confederacy is the oldest confederacy known in the Northeast there. And that's thanks to Hiawatha's Great Law of Peace and the wampum belts that were brought over. In fact, one of the tribes in North Carolina facing extinction appealed to the Iroquois Confederacy in upstate New York. That would be the Tuscarora tribe. And they were adopted by the Iroquois Confederacy and allowed to relocate up there and save their tribe, joining the other traditional 5 Iroquois tribes. Although there are other nations that are around there, like the Utica and other tribes. But the Iroquois tribes would be the Mohegan, the Mohawk, the Seneca, Cayuga, and the Onondaga. And then, of course, you got the Tuscaroras that joined them. At one time, the Cherokee were with the Longhouse people, the Haudenosaunee Iroquois. We call them the Aninadawegi, or the Moon Dancer people. But because of that, Cherokee is considered an Iroquois language. And so when I read or when I hear, Kanankaha or Mohawk or other, Onondaga, a lot of it is I can pick out about half of the words. I would compare it to like knowing French and Spanish and then hearing Portuguese. And I can kind of pick out some of it, but it's different. A little easier with Italian, but that's on the linguistic side of things. Back to the beginning of negotiations with the settlers, because now we're moving beyond just first contact and camping together for the first time. Now we're actually going to do treaties and stuff. And so that's where Sir Alexander Cuming comes in. And so we have the 1729 voyage to Buckingham Palace, or wherever it was in London, England, to meet with the royals there and pledge allegiance and loyalty as dutiful subjects, loyal subjects of the king. And as such, the crown began to send over gifts and pots and linens and salt and pork barrels and all kinds of stuff were being unloaded at the port of Charleston, South Carolina, and shipped to the Cherokee Nation, when there's a lot of poor people around there, and so there's already like just a growing animosity because of the friendliness between the British and the Cherokee. And the British don't want the settlers getting into the mountains, because the Cherokee have already, I mean, it's already been secured. It doesn't need to
Right.
be conquered because there's already a peace treaty, which we then reaffirmed in 1763 during the French and Indian War, where the Cherokee fought with the British against the French.
Now, do you think that the British were acting in good faith? That they genuinely wanted to respect the fact that the Cherokee were already there? Or do you think that this was, in some ways, a predatory practice? And I know it's bringing gifts is not the same thing as bringing opium, but they have a reputation for declaring war on a society via bringing things to them. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think just at the time, making the treaties with the Cherokee Nation and staying on friendly terms was just a way of land banking future interests, while they had more interest in other areas at the time, because the Appalachian Mountains were so rugged and such a geographic obstacle. They considered having the peace treaty with the Cherokee. The land's been secured. Let's focus on the better land with the good ports and maritime access, and flat land that we can plant in plantations and
Right. So
develop very quickly.
Charleston, like the coastal North Carolina, Outer
Right.
Banks, things like that.
And turn a quick buck, because so with that, let's get to July the 4th. So July the 4th, 1776. You've got this new landed gentried aristocracy in the United States. And they want to be the blue bloods. Much is made about George Washington as the first president of the United States and general of the Army of the Potomac. But he was also a land surveyor, although, strangely, most of the land that he ever surveyed was for himself, and he claimed for himself. And he illegally claimed over 250 million acres beyond the proclamation line of 1763. So with the signing of the Declaration of Independence on July 4th, 1776, George Washington instantly became Elon Musk type rich.
I thought he couldn't tell a lie.
Not with billions with a B, trillions with a capital T. Like 250 million acres, huge parts of southern Ohio, southern Indiana, Kentucky, West Virginia, Tennessee. I mean, this guy was surveying land everywhere he explored. He staked the flag and claimed for himself. He was a very prolific surveyor, claiming land for himself. That's not normally how a surveyor, because I being a surveyor myself, normally you survey land for other people. And of course, none of those land claims were valid because they were beyond the British claim line. So when July 4th comes around and we declare independence from England, well, now the 1763 claim line doesn't matter. Virginia then immediately laid claim to the entire West. And so, in fact, Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Illinois, Indiana, Kentucky, West Virginia, like, what is there, 7 different states that all were at one time just all part of Virginia. It was all Virginia, part of Virginia's Western claim. So we see this strange explosion of colonial claims to the West during and after the Revolutionary War, where North Carolina and Georgia and New York and Pennsylvania and Maryland and Virginia, and they're all trying to draw lines out west and claim out to the Mississippi and beyond. And so in today's context, I would call it the Greater America Project. just like the Greater Israel Project. It began on the coastline and then just spread like a cancer until it reached to the far side of the other coast.
I think that's an important point, Yona, is that a lot of the things that we are seeing transpire today, and I know it is said often, but there is nothing new under the sun. These things that we are seeing play out before our very eyes, they have all happened before, and a lot of it has happened right here or has been done by the United States government. So I think that's a really important point to bring up, and was obviously it's important for how we got here today, but I think I would ask, and we can get to this later, but where does that leave us? Where do we go from here? We're going to get there.
Well, at this point, we are at the Battle of Yorktown, end of the Revolutionary War.
So,
and
Yona,
there's massive immigration now pouring into the Appalachian region. Up in Pennsylvania, you got the Germans. Most of everywhere else, the Scots-Irish. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, so before we get into that, what would you describe the relationship like between Native Americans? And I know that this is a kind of a blanket question, for there probably a lot of nuance here, but what would you describe the situation? Because in some of the stories that I have heard, as far as coastal North Carolina, when the colonists were coming here originally and they were exploring, maybe not even with the idea of putting down roots at that time, that relationships with the coastal Carolina tribes, some of them were good. So I know that there are instances of them getting along, and that's supposedly what happened with the lost colony, right? That they ended
at
up
Roanoke with Elizabeth Dare.
Yes. And that they ended up kind of becoming part of the Croatan Native American tribe, that they just integrated. Right. And right. So what would you say at this point, where we're getting ready to establish the influx of especially the Scots-Irish into Appalachia?
Right. We've won the American War, and now the gates are thrown open and immigrants just begin to pour into rugged mountain terrain, which is more suited to two particular types of people: the Southern Germans, who were coming over from the Alps and, Bavaria. So they're used to the mountains.
Right.
And the same thing with the Highlanders that are coming over from Scotland, where they roll their R's. And so I'm sorry. Was there something we were?
Well, you were getting to the history of when they were coming in, but I was asking before that, like, or right up at this point, what was the relationship like with the British colonists, the people that were already here, with Native Americans at that point?
So interestingly enough, with the Cherokee, one of the clans, the Aniwodi, or the long-haired twisted clan, that's kind of like a naturalization clan. That would be like if you weren't born Cherokee, but you're like going to become Cherokee. So you learn the language, you learn some of the history, you've got a particular skill or something, and then you're literally become just like a full-blown Cherokee citizen. Because of that, there was some assimilation. However, with a lot of the raiding parties from Virginia long hunters that were trespassing into the bluegrass areas, that'd be Kentucky, down into the Barrens near like Nashville. So we're talking Middle Tennessee, Southern Kentucky. They were constantly warned, and as a result, there were retaliatory raids. So there would be a raid of Virginia hunters to come through the Yadkin Valley, maybe from North Carolina or from Virginia, and they would come over. They'd get caught hunting by Chief Dick. He would run them off. Chief Dick was the one who warned them, if if we catch you back here again, we'll make this a dark and bloody ground with your soil. Well, because of that, Kentucky historian John Pilson hypothesized that the word Kentucky meant dark and bloody ground. But in fact, it's from Kanawha, which means turkey roost. I mentioned that earlier. I mean, I guess if you don't know the language, you can just use your imagination and make up something then.
Say whatever you
want.
want.
You don't know it. I mean, anyways, back to the story here. So generally speaking, there really wasn't much trade or contact because of the proclamation line of 1763. When there were raids, then you would have raids like when Jenny Wiley or other settlers in Virginia, even in the Shenandoah Valley, would be abducted and taken all the way over to, the Ohio Valley or something, and somehow escape and make it back and tell their tale. And so, it's because of the trade routes. There was just so much more trade going either across to the Great Lakes or down and around the coastline. And, it was just such a geographic barrier. And so until we see the development of the Pennsylvania Railroad and the, just the amazing effort put in to connect Philadelphia to Pittsburgh. Of course, Pittsburgh, you're on the Ohio River at that point. You're connected to everything. And at which point, in some ways, Appalachia largely gets bypassed. So what's interesting is, because of the rugged isolation of the mountains, linguistically and culturally and demographically, to this day, Appalachia is largely kind of like a land time forgot, just like a snapshot in time of Scots-Irish language mixed with Cherokee and Shawnee and Iroquois, and of course, a home of the rednecks. We'll get into the redneck army that fought Don Chapin and the Logan County Sheriff and the Baldwin Felts coal detectives at Blair Mountain in 1920 and 21, fighting against corporate tyranny in company towns, which over 100 years thereafter, and we find ourselves in the year 2026, still fighting the same fight. Now
I got it.
With Peter Thiel and Elon Musk, and they've got their Prosperitown and Roatan, Honduras, and I would call it the broligarchy. The broligarchs. I've heard that term. That I'm not making that up. I already heard that. I stole that from somebody else. But before we get all the way to present time with the broligarchs and the current reconquest of Earth for its natural resources worldwide, largely Appalachia was just kind of left to log cabins and driving a mule team up the Rock Bottom Creek to get from cabin to cabin, or floating the logs down the river. And that was Appalachia in most places up until almost the year 1900. Many Cherokee stayed in Appalachia and just lied. And when census takers came around and when neighbors came around, no, we're not Cherokee. We're Melungeon. We're mixed. We're something else.
And I want us to get it on at some point. I want us to talk about what is Melungeon, and then what is that, that was, they were done wrong. They were discriminated against. They were, that was,
well, that's
in some
because
cases
of the Virginia race laws. And so that's one thing I kind of skipped over, but, Nathaniel Bacon's rebellion and his army of the poor which declared their war against the gented landed aristocracy, the gentrified landed aristocracy of Tidewater, Virginia, and North Carolina. Well, it was just Carolina at that time. They hadn't split apart into North and South yet. But based around the James River colonies, Bacon's rebellion, what was it? The Declaration of the Rights of the Poor, their manifesto, was dropped on July the 4th, 1676. And so when you look at, the Declaration of Independence, they actually began signing it on July the 2nd. Today is the 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence, but it's July the 4th, and I think they did that on purpose, 100 years to the date, to cast a historical shadow against Bacon's rebellion, where women, men, white, black, red, whatever, poor people in general, all banded together, the army of the poor, to fight the rich. Granted, once they got done fighting the rich, they then turned on their Indian co-conspirators and then burned Indian villages, and then it fell into complete barbarism. And then 3-4 months later, more ships arrived from England and it was snuffed out. But for a brief moment, there were flashes of democracy in English, although I would venture to say the horizontal system of caucusing and confederating with different chiefs, all of equal authority, was arguably more democratic. And as you pointed out, the Constitution of the Confederacy of the Iroquois is the actual basis and founding document for the American Constitution, which takes large parts verbatim from the Iroquois Constitution. And in fact, U.S. Congress has given official recognition and thanks to the Iroquois for their contributions to the United States Constitution and the Bill of Rights, because the ability of all of the women of the tribe to impeach leaders, the right of free speech, the right of self-defense, a lot of those are not in the Magna Carta. That's not part of English law. This whole thing of women have a right to impeach leaders, and impeachment process, removal from office, no competence, loss of competence, and then the right to free speech being inviolable, and the whole concept of your rights being natural rights, that it's not a privilege that the state is giving to you. It's merely pronouncing or acknowledging obvious rights that we are all born with equally. And so it's just a very, very different take. So with that, what changes for Appalachia? The biggest change, I'm going to get more into the Indian Removal Act and issues with the concentration camps. Prisoner of war camps. Wait a second. Put a casino on it. Call them reservations. Same exact thing. They're human concentration camps and prisoner of war camps.
Yes.
I don't know of anywhere else where you go and there's only this people and no one else is here. And wow, all the Cherokees are concentrated just at this one camp, but it's not a concentration camp. And they were all taken as prisoners of war in a war, but they're not prisoners of war. It's a res. And then, you say, well, and I get that all the time about, why don't I live down there? Why don't I get the big government check? And, well, there's strings attached when you get enrollment. And then, are you on the Dawes roll? How do you get enrollment, and going through all of that with my genealogy and everything else. And so we'll get into that in the other one. I want to keep it more on Appalachia. And so the mix of Scots Irish and Cherokee and Shawnee in terms of living and hunting in the Appalachian Mountains, growing corn, hunting turkey and deer, that culture is alive and well to this day, eating green beans and corn and grits and hominy. That's Cherokee food. That's not British food.
Right.
That's Cherokee food, this whole corn diet.
And honestly, Yona, very much part of, so as far as Appalachian culture goes and Southern culture, they are not the same thing. There is an overlap, but they are
Oh,
different.
yeah.
But a lot
Because
of
the Southern culture is mixed with the Creeks and the Seminoles, and they have a different everything. And
yeah,
of course, they have a different influence because there were so many French. There's such a huge French influence and a little bit of a Spanish, but more of a French influence in South Carolina with the Huguenots. Lots of French in South Carolina. And of course, that goes without saying when you're talking about Biloxi and Southern Mississippi and New Orleans and all the way over to Beaumont. Again, French Texas. Very, very French. In fact, the Louisiana Purchase was bought from the French. 1804, I think Thomas Jefferson bought it from Napoleon Bonaparte.
and the food that you described from the Cherokee, that is still very much part of Southern diet, though. If you're looking for like
Fried
Southern
green
cooking,
tomatoes, fried yellow squash.
yes. Green beans, hominy, as you said, or grits, things
Yeah.
like that are still very, very much an important part of that Southern or cuisine, really, but definitely important in those
Greens,
areas.
collard greens, lots of vegetables, heavy
Creasy
on the
greens.
vegetables. Yeah. And so when it comes to access and everything, other than, the real breakthrough with Western expansion came with the digging of the Erie Canal. Clinton's ditch, DeWitt Clinton, governor of New York, managed to get that dug across Syracuse to the top of Niagara Falls. And that allowed Western expansion to blast over to Chicago. And then at Chicago, they have a connection to the Illinois River down to the Mississippi River. And that just allowed a complete bypass of Appalachia. And so the Ohio River largely became accessible by steamboats coming up from New Orleans so far as Pittsburgh, but it took a lot of clearing of snags and bad flooding. It just really remained a rather backwater rural area up until the American War of Secession, or Civil War, if you want to call it that. Most foreign languages refer to it as the American War of Secession. It was taught as the War of Secession in the United States up until just after World War II, when they just kind of rebranded it as the American Civil War. In the South, it's called the War of Northern Aggression, which is largely accurate because, the Civil War began with Northern Army occupying Southern states and preventing free elections. And so it, anywho, I digress. During the Civil War, Abraham Lincoln, I think in 1863, got three drunks to lean against each other like a tripod on an island in the Ohio at Wheeling, Virginia. And they proclaimed West Virginia in the middle of the Civil War, completely taken out of another state, in total and complete violation of the U.S. Constitution. And they didn't even have a referendum vote. Well, when they did have a referendum vote, it lost. Well, they did it anyways. And the whole reason for it was because two of the biggest financial backers of Abraham Lincoln into office was the owners of the Chesapeake in Ohio and the Baltimore and Ohio railways. Now, just think about those terms, Ashley. Baltimore and Ohio, Chesapeake and Ohio. We're talking about going from the Atlantic seacoast ports to the Ohio River. In other words, these are both trans-Appalachian corporate ventures to get private and public money to build public infrastructure that will be privately owned. That would be American railroading in a nutshell, and which led to the railroad baron age. So these two railroad barons, Collis P. Huntington, Horace Greeley, they basically were given West Virginia. That's the boundary of West Virginia was largely carved out for railroad lines. And then they put new railroad lines in almost every single holler. And first they cut all of the timber, built sawmills everywhere. And then they sank mine shafts everywhere. And so you saw in the immediate aftermath of the war, it's called the Reconstruction period, where Appalachia then is just colonized by corporations with company towns and largely enslaved. For those that aren't familiar, company towns, you weren't even paid in American currency. You were given wooden scrip, which was a company coin, wood nickels that you could then take to the company store, where you would pay 3 to 4 times the market rate for anything that you needed: shoes, clothes, shampoo, soap.
Sounds like prison.
Yeah. And of course, if the husband died in the mine before his body had ever even been pulled out of the mine, the rabble rousers were already down at the company house to throw the widow and the orphans out on the street.
And really quickly, Yona, I want to say too, so in the foothills of North Carolina, there was an area that was known after, the colonization of big textile production, furniture making, and mills in general, right? So there was a lot of
all
factories.
Along the French Broad River through there, large mills. That's kind of what built, that's the earliest history of Buncombe County and Asheville, right.
And in Hickory area too, known as the furniture capital of the world, shout out Hickory. But there was a lot of textiles, a lot of mills. This is how people, and actually there ended up a lot of people moved from the Appalachian Mountains during that time, and maybe in the 60s and 70s, because of the desolation, the poverty in the Appalachian Mountains. So they went to other places like in the foothills and, up north.
That's right.
They scattered in order to have a better opportunity. But
now you're getting into the post-World War II era, where you saw large Appalachian migration either down to the foothills in the Carolinas and the Smokies, or up to Detroit to the car factories.
Yes,
as
and
the coal mines and the sawmills dried up.
Yes, and actually a lot of them went up north back. They went up to in upstate New York. There's a lot of descendants up there, and so there is some overlap in the culture with upstate and the mountains. But what I wanted to say, and I don't mean to derail you, but is that the mill houses still exist. Yeah. So when I'm going back that way, I'm going to be getting pictures, and maybe, maybe we can revisit this subject and I can show some videos, but the mill houses are still there. And Hunger Games, District 11, that was shot in Western North Carolina, at least part of it, but all of it was in the Appalachian Mountain area. And that was because these structures still exist, because that is exactly the situation that you're describing. Mill houses, people working for the company town idea. It still is there, incredibly.
The sad thing is, when you look at the topographic maps, the best maps that are available around the turn of the century, so now we've made it up to the year 1900. I think, let me see what time it now. All right, we're right on track. All right. I've tried to kind of boil this, condense this down. thumbnail history of Appalachia. But we're getting up to the year 1900. And when you look at the map in terms of infrastructure, there are major cities in Appalachia with overhead electrified street trolleys and trams and passenger rail stations and passenger rail lines crisscrossing all over the place. Along with the Ohio River, many of its tributaries have locks and dams allowing for navigation. At that time, again, we're talking 1880s, 1890s. There are canals, navigation canals that are in operation connecting Cincinnati to Toledo, Huntington, West Virginia, Portsmouth, Ohio, all the way to Cleveland, Ohio. Canals connecting from Pittsburgh to Youngstown to Toledo, cross country. Just staggering amounts of major intrastate infrastructure. Let's see. Hopefully the dog scratching on the window here does not try to break the glass through again. If it gets real bad, I may have to take a moment to go run and move the dog off the window. But
Sure.
Let's see, where was I? So we're talking about all this infrastructure through Appalachia that was constructed at great expense. And that was at the height of extraction with sawmills and coal mines and everything else. And then really by the time you get to, let's say around, just after World War II, and then go from that point to today. So we're talking the last 80 years. It's been really Ohio, Southern Ohio, West Virginia, Western Pennsylvania, Western New York. I mean, it's all Rust Belt. It's all complete Rust Belt, and it's characterized by abandoned canals, abandoned railroads, abandoned towns, abandoned mines. Just at this point, Appalachia can largely be described as abandoned.
Right. And I think and like what we were talking about, people, my family that was from there. So my grandparents, on one side of the family, they were sharecroppers, meaning they were completely impoverished. The other people, my grandfather has literally, this is not hyperbole, he had 20 siblings. Now, that was his mother passed and his father remarried someone else and had, a second family basically, but 20 siblings. How wealthy do you think somebody with 20 siblings is going to be? Or my grandmother that grew up on a farm. So it was truly one of the hallmarks of Appalachia and coming from that area is poverty. And this was one of the big reasons that people had to leave. They tried to go to the towns like in the foothills of North Carolina and the other places that Yona is describing, because they were trying to make a better life. And this was really, as Yona said, it was after World War II. So this was really peak of the American dream of you can go somewhere else. And unfortunately, to a large extent,
a lot of people were driven off their land too. I don't want to just gloss over the fact that unlike other areas of the country, in particular, the Appalachian part of the country, the government, starting in the Great Depression with Franklin D. Roosevelt, with the Works Progress Administration and the Tennessee Valley Authority in particular, they erected so many dams all across Appalachia, not just in Tennessee, but North Carolina, West Virginia, Kentucky, Ohio, Pennsylvania. And they flooded so much of the really good farmland. So many of the Cherokee sites were put underwater, like Chota and Tennessee. Um, I mean, it's staggering. And all that hydropower and coal power plants that were built up and down the Tennessee Valley were to allow the K2 secret town of Oak Ridge to work on nuclear enrichment. And so, just as a sidebar, it's funny, there's a lot of the nuclear industry based in Appalachia with gaseous diffusion, nuclear enrichment of the uranium fuel rods, and just different parts of the, well, for one, there is no such thing as the peaceful nuclear program and wartime nuclear program when it comes to the United States. It's part and part. It's one and the same, because we need weapons grade plutonium to make nuclear weapons. Plutonium is not a naturally occurring substance. You can only obtain plutonium with nuclear reactors. And so we use nuclear reactors ostensibly to make power, and most of them are boiling water reactors. So they're literally causing nuclear reaction to heat water, to boil the water, to make steam, to push a large water wheel, basically, around an axle that's going to spin a turbine that's going to generate watts. And so, I mean, at that point, you're better off just to have a hydro plant and have water going over a water wheel, like a mill that you see in Western North Carolina that's still there after 200 years, made out of stone and wood. So,
are you talking about Murray's Mill?
Well, I mean, name your mill. I mean, when you talk about the early development of Appalachia by the Scots-Irish, who were masters with stone and masters with working the water. And instead, by World War II and thereafter, all of the best ground in Appalachia largely is being put underwater.
Yeah. Well, that's a great point. And the other thing, too, is that like what we talked about earlier, there's nothing new under the sun. And you're talking about when industry really comes to that area and becomes abandoned. And then you're circling it back around to exactly what is happening with data centers and the other interest, the renewed interest in the Appalachian Mountains in today's day and time. That's very fascinating to me. But also the mining conversation, right? This was something that came out of after Hurricane Helene. There was a lot of conversation surrounding the lithium that is in Western North Carolina, quartz mines that are in Spruce Pine in the mountains of North Carolina. So these themes never went away, although they have evolved in some way, shape, or form. They're still there, and the poverty level is incredibly high still to this day.
Yeah. The extraction industries in Appalachia of coal and oil and gas and timber and everything, because it was so intense, it led to the development of a whole new industry by DuPont and Standard Oil Company. And they began this whole new industry called petrochemical products. The chemical industry began in Clendon in West Virginia around 1907 with the first chemical products facility. And so, that would lead to the development of like PFAS, Teflon coatings, plastics, all kinds of things that you can't even pronounce,
Correct. And they are still there. There's still contaminated water to this day, and there is no accountability for these people.
Like Union Carbide Island in the middle of the Canal River, downtown Charleston. Its sister facility was built in Bhopal, India. But unfortunately, the sister facility of Union Carbide in Bhopal, their pile of methyl isocyanate, or MIC, did catch fire, which led to a huge phosgene gas cloud that I think killed, I don't know, 100,000 people.
It was a lot of people. And the other thing
I
that I
should
want to
probably
point
look
out,
that up. I want to get those death toll numbers a little bit more precise.
and my understanding is that there are people that are still trying to get justice for the like what you were talking about in Bhopal, India. And another really interesting thing that I would like to point out since this came up is you are probably familiar with the John Benet Ramsey case and the fact that Patsy Ramsey and her father, her whole family, they're from West Virginia. They were intimately connected in the upper crust there, that her father was actually an executive at that company where this transpired. So I'm not saying it means anything, but I'm also saying it's a small world.
It's really, really cute when you look at the West Virginia state government, the power of the West Virginia governor, and the names that are all around Charleston, West Virginia, which is the state capital. So, for example, if you fly into West Virginia, into CWR, Yeager Field, you will deplane into the Rockefeller Airport Terminal. I mean, and then you've got Rockefeller, Carnegie, Greeley, Vanderbilt. I mean, it's a who's who of the broligarchs of 100 years ago.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And don't forget about the Vanderbilt connection to Western North Carolina. They built the Biltmore House in Buncombe County. Yes.
That's the Commodore Vanderbilt, the Biltmore estate.
Yes. And their descendants
Shout
are
out
still
to Anderson Cooper.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Their descendants are still operational to this day via Anderson Cooper. And a lot of people know Anderson Cooper, obviously, from CNN. But what you may not know, some people, I bet you do, Yona, is that Anderson Cooper was part of what I consider a propaganda campaign against public school kids because he was an anchor on Channel 1 News, which public school children, at least in my area, were forced to watch every single day. And that was, I remember getting in trouble many times for talking during Channel 1 News. So that was...
I hated that. They put that in our school at Bardstown High School. They had the Channel 1 monitors put into every single classroom.
Yes.
And they had commercials.
Yeah.
Before and after, like we're a captive audience in school being forced to watch television.
Yeah, Anderson Cooper. So all that to say that as you're talking about this older generation of broligarchy, it still exists. The Biltmore House is still there. Anderson Cooper's still out here spewing his nonsense, whatever. So it's really intimately involved to what we're dealing with today.
Cherokee roots actually are. My great-great-grandmother, Yona Aniwodi, she came from Swannanoa and Black Mountain, which is in eastern Buncombe County, just to the east of Asheville.
Right. You can if you hop on Interstate 40 and you just hit that from Hickory all the way up, and you'll pass right by Swannanoa and Black Mountain, headed towards Asheville.
Yona's peeps.
Love it. Okay, so
in Cherokee, we actually have a word for North Carolina, call it Jumoneti, which means the old mount.
Very beautiful.
Jumoneti.
I love that.
Jumoneti,
So,
Kanadagi. Anywho.
Yes. So, okay. Anyway, I have gotten you off track, but you were talking about the industry that was in Western North Carolina. You were talking about the forever chemicals and sort of this
we've made it up
predatory
to the 1950s, and now the domination of the chemical industries in Appalachia. And so in Western Pennsylvania, all across West Virginia, down into Kentucky and in Tennessee, we've got it's concentrated with petrochemical plants and petrochemical products and production. And so just very, very, very toxic industries, granted, we're not making as much aluminum and iron and other things with the Rust Belt, but what is left behind, we've got mountaintop removal in Appalachia, which is one of the most environmentally destructive processes on Earth. And, with abandoned mines and mine runoff, Appalachia is still the largest temperate forest on the East Coast, thanks only to its incredibly rugged terrain and topography. And because of that, and because of the caves that are all underneath the limestone karst formations in central Appalachia, it's enabled the Cherokee to immaculately preserve the language, to develop a written language for Chief Sequoia to actually transform Cherokee from a largely secretive cursive written language to a standardized printed language that was easy to print into books. I mean, the whole purpose of Sequoia sitting down with Samuel Worcester, the Baptist missionary, who was a printer, a book printer, and had a printing press, was to come up with a print symbol for each Cherokee sound instead of these really fancy calligraphy type things that look like Sanskrit, and to make it just a standardized print. And that's why you see it when you see modern print Cherokee, you'll see like a capital D or a capital R, and you're like, oh, it's almost like Russian. It's like, no, they were just trying to find symbols that were close to what it used to look like. But then, of course, if you go to the CIA's favorite online resource, we all lovingly call Wikipedia, they'll tell you that Cherokee was largely illiterate and then invented an entire language and taught everyone literacy within 2 years.
Make it make sense.
And 98% literacy rate by the time of Trail of Tears from a guy that was illiterate. If you're illiterate, how do you invent a language then? But anyway, never mind. But today in Appalachia, there's been a major revitalization of the Cherokee language thanks to the Cherokee tribes. There's 3 federally recognized tribes, Eastern, Western, and Kituwa Band, and largely taken over the Indian Health Service. That was led by Chief Wilma Mankiller, the female chief of the Western Cherokee. She's actually on one of the quarters. There's an American 25-cent piece, quarter piece, that has Wilma Mankiller on it and Cherokee written on it. If you look real close, you'll see Salagi Ayeli, Cherokee Nation, written in Cherokee on the coin, which is fucking cool. And if you go to Cherokee, North Carolina, or to Tahlequah in Oklahoma, on the street signs everywhere is Cherokee and English.
Yes, I was just in Cherokee not too long ago, and that was one of the things I was thinking about in our conversation, that the signs are in Cherokee. The street signs, road signs, names, all over.
So I wonder if it'll let me edit my name. Yeah, I can edit my name right here. Let's see if it will display Cherokee. Let's see. Yona Aniwodi. Well, I see it.
I see it.
All right, there you go. Speaking of Cherokee, there it is. So at this point, moving forward, it's interesting. We're seeing broligarchs coming into Appalachia now. As a basically kind of like a prepper type situation, breakout bunkers and somewhere to hide out. And that's kind of been a thing since World War II and during the Cold War, has been building bunkers in Appalachia. And in fact, the congressional bunker at the Greenbrier Hotel in West Virginia, White Sulphur Springs, West Virginia, that's a little bit better known. That's right near the West Virginia border. That was replaced by a newer facility. You've got the Mount Weather, Virginia facility, which is up above Lynchburg, not far from D.C. You've got all of the BSL biolabs in Fort Detrick over in Frederick, Maryland, just north of D.C. Then you've got Raven Rock Mountain Complex on the Maryland-Pennsylvania state line, right near the campus of Mount St. Mary's University at Emmitsburg, Maryland. And that's the main command and control center for our permanently unelected government. But we still have elections. It's something to still get excited about. I mean, at this point, really since the 2001 passage of the Patriot Act, politics has kind of moved into the realm of fantasy football.
I agree.
And, when you look at just one example, the AIPAC funding, just in terms of the Israeli lobby and how much influence they have, largely probably the most powerful lobby in the United States at this point, but not the only one. But when you look at this game and the way it's framed to the many, that we have this democracy and everything, well, the Princeton study already proved that the will of the people is completely ignored by Congress. Doesn't matter if there's 99% of the people that want something to happen. If we don't have any oligarchs that want it to happen, it ain't going to happen. Meanwhile, if oligarchs want something to happen, it don't matter if 99% of people against it, well, then the city council will just cancel their council meeting, and then they'll approve the data center anyway. Screw you people.
Exactly.
That's kind of what they do. Because they can't take the heat. They'll either have the police arrest everybody in there, or they'll get up and walk away from their desk and have the police shut the thing down. They can't take the heat. They don't want a participatory democracy. This never was a democracy. It was ostensibly a republic, but these founding documents were written by slave owners and conquistadors and conquerors. And their whole idea was all of this land should be ours. And so I view the founding fathers in 1776 through the same exact lens that I view settlers in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip today, speaking Yiddish, LARPing as Middle Easterners with their Polish and Russian names. Same exact thing. This greater Israel project, this greater America project. And, it never was about living in peace with the Indians. Right. When push came to shove, it was about Indian Removal Act. Get them all out of here. Deport them all to Oklahoma. Send them all to the Gaza Strip. Put them all on the Panhandle. Get them out of here.
Right. Yeah, and that is a really important point, and something that I think, it's not an issue that goes away. The question that I have, and I don't know that you have an answer for this, but it's that, where do we go from here, right? So like you had brought up the just put them on a res, right? So we know that in Western North Carolina, the Cherokee do have a reservation, and they do have a lot of land, and they do have a casino, and they are able to pay for a lot of things for their community from that. The place looks very beautiful. It's very well kept.
And Harris Casino. Visit Harris.
Yes. Harris Cherokee Casino. So, but what does that mean? And one of the things that you and I talked about, we're going to get into in another episode, is more in depth on a lot of the cultural and social issues of where we're at today, that are very important and often missed and neglected, not discussed. But that's one of the things that I was
the perfect place to bookend this and pick up the next time. And that's where it really gets down to where the rubber meets the road. And that is my favorite 4-letter word, LAND, land. That's what it's all about. It's always about the land grab and nothing else. And, saying that it's about stewardship or bringing democracy, that's the same as the first date yawning and then the arm drops around the shoulder and, whoa, what's going on here? Things are moving
as
a
old as
little bit
time.
too quickly here. I know how this is going to end up. So the truth is, it was a land grab. And as soon as the people are taken off the land, then they can cut every last tree, completely destroy the land. And the difference between the colonization of Europe and the colonization of Africa and the colonization of North America, the great difference today in the year 2026 is infrastructure. Because when you look at France and Germany and Belgium and England, despite 2 world wars and all the other destruction that's happened there, their canals are in operation. Their railroads are in operation. And they have freeways. Don't give me this crap about, but it's too big. America's too, we can't have cool stuff because it's too big, bro. Then what about the Trans-Siberian Railroad from Vladivostok on the Pacific all the way to St. Petersburg on the Baltic? Don't give me that crap. The number one country in the world should never be offering excuses as to why we can't have the cool stuff that everybody else manages to build. Or to tell me that the terrain is too rugged to have faster trains when in reality, you look at where China's been building their high-speed rail network, it's insane. Looking at some of these rail lines that they built where 90% of the track is either on bridge or in tunnel. Less than 10% is on dry land, so to speak. I mean, it's just the last song that I worked on today, I didn't necessarily make it for this episode, but just the introduction to the video, which is about a minute long, I think really kind of explains where we are today. I've got like 4 different little 30-second or 20-second long shorts of different trains around the world.
Yeah. Do you want to
America? And
do you want to play them?
Yeah. Let me pull up that. Because the song itself is like 8 minutes long. We don't need to watch an 8-minute long video of a rail line from France to Switzerland. But I would like to show the intro. Let me pull that up there. I think I called that edible. This is an edible. So it's definitely digestible. There's our high-speed train, the Estella Express, on its way from New York to Boston. Not very fast. I'd say it's about 50 miles per hour, maybe 45. Here's France. Here's Japan. Like blink and you miss it. Wait, now we're going to go to North Carolina. It takes like 10 seconds to go by. Oh. Anyhow, I'll stop it right there. I will definitely drop links to the music and all that stuff later. Here.
Yeah, please do.
Let's see. How do I? Oh yeah, this is StreamYard. I know what I'm doing here. I've been doing a show for 4 years. You'd think I'd know how to do it now. Let's see. There we go. Okay. And then I can get rid of that. All right. So, yeah, that's just a little snapshot of all the cool stuff that we don't have. And of course, the money goes to empire. And what is empire? What is government? Well, it's basically rich people trying to think of how they can monopolize our common wealth, the wealth of the earth itself. And so the bookend that I said that we end on the land, being a land surveyor and being Cherokee and mixed European descent, for me, I embrace science and law and everything, boundary law, property rights, but at the same time, I don't really care whose name is on the deed because I see it differently, Whereas fee simple title ownership and property would tell you that you inherit the property title from the previous ancestor if it's been passed down through, inheritance, heirs and signs forever, or you can buy it from the current landowner and you've got a deed of conveyance where you now have title to it. And then you can go to the courthouse, court clerk's office, and go back and get a history of who's owned the property going all the way back to an original land grant or claim or whatever, which is really all of the land title in the United States is bogus claims because it pretty much all goes back to either the Vatican or the King or Queen of England saying that, well, God said that I own it, so I'll give you part of it. Here's my royal stamp. And now this 200 or 2,000 acres is yours because I gave it to you because God gave it to me. And never mind the Indians that are around there. Just kill them all and it'll be yours free and clear. And that's what the whole point of the Indian Removal Act was. It says so in the bill to extinguish any competing claims to the land. Again, it's a land grab. And why do they take the land? Because then they can destroy everything on the land. But from the Cherokee perspective and other tribes, we don't inherit the land from our grandparents. We borrow the land from our great-grandchildren. It's not our land to destroy. It's not our rivers to poison. It's not our forests to completely clear cut. That wealth belongs to our yet unborn great-grandchildren. It's our job to be stewards of the land and take care of it. And that's why you see so much of a fight again and again and again between the tribes and those that are here in the name of civilization and development. And we're going to make jobs, and there'll be sawmills and coal mines, and there'll be jobs at the hydropower plant after we flood the only arable land in the entire frickin' county and put it all under 100 feet of water. And all that's going to be left is this huge reservoir and mountains everywhere. I mean, that's how they have pretty much ruined Appalachia.
Yeah.
Ruined it.
So as you're, when we're talking about this, what do you think about the relationships between the Native Americans, between the Cherokee and the Scots-Irish that settled in that area? Do you feel like for the most part, the regular people, that there was truly a care and concern?
Most of the surnames and most Appalachian Cherokee are mixed with Scots-Irish.
Yeah.
And then it goes all the way back to the initial Scots-Irish that came into the mountains and immediately adopted the Cherokee way and were adopted in the Cherokee Nation in the 1600s.
Right. So
early 1700s.
When they came in, this group of people, and by the way, a lot of them were considered rebels. They were considered basically enemies of the crown, is my understanding, that they were that they were fleeing from that. So they were not down with the imperialism of the, the Anglo Empire. And
there were two types that fled to the Cherokee. There were the Maroons, Maroon. Maroons were African slaves and Indian slaves that would escape the plantation and take refuge with the Seminole or the Muskogee Creek or the Cherokee. As well, there were indentured servants that came over on the ships from Scotland and Ireland and elsewhere, Wales, England, France. And although the paperwork would say, well, 10 years, you'll pay it off. They would say, well, because of interest and this, that, and the other, and then the clothes and the food, we've had to tack an extra 5 years on your thing. And so they would also flee to the mountains at first chance. And so to this day, there's a lot of mixed blood of Cherokee with blacks and Cherokee with Scots. And
Yes.
that's led to the Freedmen Cherokee, which is a big issue, and other things. Same thing with the Seminole tribe, where you have the Black Seminole. And in fact, there were a number of times where Seminole, Creek, and Cherokee led whole parties, and they went all the way to Mexico and left the United States. And the first major Megxit, we'll call it, was led by Coacuchi and John Horse, aka Juan Caballo, who was one of the leader of the black slaves maroon community, and they went into Mexico in the early 1800s, before the Civil War period. So it's interesting. Same thing during the Underground Railroad with Harriet Tubman and others. The Underground Railroad led from Appalachia along the Ohio River, and it led across. It began at the Ohio River and led to the Canadian border. For some reason, I think some people had the wrong idea that the Underground Railroad would get you to the north, and that when you got to the Ohio River, you were free. In fact, the Underground Railroad was to get you from the border of the South, which was the Ohio River, from the Mississippi up to Pittsburgh, and then running along the Mason-Dixon line, separating Maryland from Pennsylvania. That was the border between the North and the South. So for slaves that wanted freedom, their run to freedom began at the Ohio River and the Mason-Dixon line. And from there, they had to make it all the way to Canada, because there were slave catchers all across the northern states.
You might want to lock the door. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So can you talk to us about, we talked about this earlier, the Melungeon people. And in my looking into this, one of the things that I heard was basically like a lot of people would do what you said, Yona, which is like have this idea of having Native American ancestry, like this high up a grandmother figure who was in the community, and they thought that basically it was a mixing of the Cherokee and the Scots Irish that were in Appalachia, but these people look different. Sometimes they did look more Indian. Sometimes they looked a little something else. And basically, my understanding is that these are the people that are kind of an amalgamation. Yes, there is some Cherokee and there is the Scots Irish, but there's also the Black people who were free slaves who ended up becoming part of the community and intermarrying.
Well, when it comes to the Melungeon, the thing of it is, we keep talking about, I mentioned the Iroquois, the Cherokee, the Shawnee, the Muskogee Creek, and the Seminole, because they were the larger tribes. But there were countless smaller tribes that were within Appalachia because of the isolation and the rugged mountain topography. There were a large number of small tribes throughout the mountains. The
Catawba Indians.
Catawba, you have the Yuchi, a number of small, like different Geechee communities and the Gullah communities along the Outer Banks of Carolina. Just lots of smaller tribes throughout. And of course, basically two kinds of tribes in the Southeast United States. You had tribes with permanent settlements that were there year round, and then you had these nomadic tribes that did like seasonal farm work, and they just were nomadic tribes, and they just kind of roamed around and did their thing. And a lot of that's been lost We've gone from more than 500 tribes to less than 70 recognized federal tribes today. I think 78 there are. Most have lost their culture and language. Cherokee's privileged in that we have a written language. But, when we think about Melungeons, mind you, with the Indian Removal Act of 1830, which was precipitated by the Cherokee discovering gold in Dahlonega. Dahlonega is the Cherokee word for yellow rock. Imagine that. Dahlonega, yellow rock. We found gold there. That led to the Georgia Gold Rush.
Right. I was going to ask you and clarify that was in Georgia.
Mm-hmm. Northern Georgia Gold Rush. And because the Cherokee discovered gold at their new Cherokee Res in northern Georgia, well, that's what led to the Trail of Tears. The Cherokee were moved out of Kentucky, largely out of Tennessee, and concentrated into northern Georgia, only to find out that they're on top of huge gold reserves. So that's when President Jackson commanded General Winfield Shreve, Fuss and Feathers, to concentrate the Cherokees at camp. And so Red Clay, Tennessee, in terms of actual writing on paper, is the first official concentration camp ever made. And it's on the border of Tennessee and Georgia near Chattanooga. That was the first of many trails of tears. We say Trail of Tears, but there's actually 4 different prominent routes that Cherokees followed. And there were other tribes that also were sent down the Trail of Tears with us. Along with the Cherokee, you have the Anichata or Choctaw, the Anikusa or the Muskogee, the Mashiachokchi, the Chickasaw, the Seminole, Asiminyaho. I think about the only tribe I think that's largely stayed back would be the Miccosukee tribe, Miccosukkees, which they're way down south in the Everglades, Big Cypress area, just west of Miami.
Yeah, and maybe we can even do another, like if we turn this into a little mini series, we can talk specifically about Chattanooga, because the town does try to recognize the Cherokee heritage at this place. It's really weird because there is some beautiful things there to recognize the Cherokee Indians, and that was the official start of the Trail of Tears. And they do have a statue there for Chief Dragon Canoe, and but it is also strange because it is a progressive city. It's one of the most beautiful cities, but it's this progressive, gentrified place. It's very strange where we find ourselves in regards to this kind of stuff in today's day and time. Now, back to the Melungeon people, or the Melungeon, that was people that were in the Appalachian Mountains that were...
They had Native American descent, but this is after the gold rush, after the Indian roundups, where soldiers were going from farm to farm, house to house. And if you had Indian blood, then we're taking your property. It's basically like, imagine it's like 1948 Palestine.
Right.
And you've got settlers, white settlers from Europe, that have decided with terrorism and guns and fire to show up and just take all your shit and to run you off your land.
Yes.
And take over your farms. And so what they're doing in the West Bank today is what they were doing all across Appalachia in the 1830s and the 1840s. And so, of course, we're Scottish. We're Irish. Go to the next farm. Ain't no Indians here.
Well, and the other thing, Yona, is the eugenics that they were subjected to. But there was forced sterilization of the Melungeon people, which is a well-known part of the history of North Carolina, Virginia, that it happened here against those people. So
I mentioned the female chief of the Western Cherokee, Wilma Mankiller. She was integral in the Cherokee Nation taking over the Indian Health Service that was operating the hospitals at the Cherokee reservations, where they were conducting non-consensual sterilizations and hysterectomies on Cherokee as recent as the 1980s. This is not something that was, I mean, the genocide was happening and the language was being lost. And so thanks to the Katua Academy at the Qualla boundary in Cherokee, North Carolina, there in Oconaluftee, there's K through 12 public school for Cherokee tribal members where all courses are taught in Cherokee, and they teach English too. But that has finally turned the corner to where now every year there's more Cherokee speakers instead of less.
Good.
So we've successfully saved the language.
Yeah. And that's something that I am concerned about too with the Appalachian dialect, right? Because well, first of all, it evolved from a combination of everything that we have been talking about with the Cherokee, the Native Americans, and the Scots Irish, and then maybe like a little bit of German in there as well. And Yona has already illustrated this very well, very isolated. So there is an Appalachian dialect, particularly Southern Appalachian, and it's different than Southern accent. It is not the same thing. And that's one of the things that I feel it makes me sad, because I feel like there is a dilution of that certainly in today's day and time. But to me, it's
I'm partially to blame for it, because I mean, having done radio and TV and music most of my life and having studied so many other languages, when I speak with my children, and when I speak English to them, I speak the best English I can.
Mm-hmm.
And like for this interview, I'm generally speaking what I would deem my broadcast English. I mean, where I grew up and the way I spoke growing up in my hometown, back my holler on Murphy Creek, talking like that there. You know, unfortunately, when people hear thick Appalachian accent, immediately taking points off your IQ.
Oh, 100%.
Then where I was in a car wreck and I lost my top teeth and I looked hick as complete fuck, pardon my language. Looks, so many people just judge you on looks alone. I look the part, I sound the part, and you know, they just wouldn't imagine. Really wouldn't imagine. It's so much of a stereotype. And so, you know, I really got to thinking about it when I had to move out and things went south with darling baby mama, and being away from the kids and talking to them every single day and playing with them and thinking about it. Because it wasn't until I was back in Kentucky and around all my Kentucky folk that I just started talking hillbilly every day. Just like, you know, it's my native language. And, you know, even though I really hadn't talked like that for 30, 35 years, it's like nothing. Talking to how I growed up.
Yeah, you fall back into it.
And then that's when I realized, oh, wow, I've never talked like this around any of my kids. None of my kids. And I realized subconsciously, I didn't want to pass along the accent to my kids. I did not want them to speak the way that I spoke growing up. And the funny thing is, my mom did the same exact thing. My mom spoke perfect English to me. And my mom is the native Kentuckian. But she got a master's degree and everything else and worked. She said it took her years to get rid of her Kentucky accent. And she worked on it for years.
Yeah. And for me, it wasn't even really a conscious thing. Like I have heard a recording of me when I was very young, and it was a very, very, very heavy Western North Carolina accent. So there is some of that Southern element, but some of the Appalachian element, right? Because there is a blend and a difference between the foothills and Appalachia. And that I guess just maybe being in public school, being exposed to that. I had a teacher that was really big on grammar when I was in the 5th grade. So I used to say ain't all the time. And we had this little system in school. So if you said ain't in your little paycheck, that was your reward at the end of the week for, Good Friday or like whatever they called it, you would have a deduction like 5 or 10 cents or whatever that was, if you had been caught using the word ain't. So there's these kinds of systems. Now I have to wonder, like, was that some kind of a program that came out of like Department of Education or something like that, some sort of training? But that things like that definitely they change. And then of course, if you go to college or something like that, you're around people from all over the place and you have professors from all over the place. So it just changes. And so that has happened to me. Now, luckily, I still have 2 of my grandparents and they very much still have the Appalachian dialect. My grandfather, for example, like if you're saying it was really good or it was a good day or something, he'll say hit was such, I don't know, hit was so good or something like that. So I still have some exposure to that, which I am grateful for, but I do worry about it because I know that the Native Americans were first, but I also consider the Scots Irish heritage and the fact that they were rebels and the fact that they lived in this isolated, hard area, that is important to me as well. So,
and in terms of a lexicon and a living vocabulary, the Appalachian accent has had quite an influence on the rest of the country. And much of its roots, again, the base of the stew is largely Cherokee and Scots Irish English. So, for example, yes in Cherokee is uh-huh. No is uh-uh. Uh-huh. Uh-uh. That's Cherokee. That's Appalachian. That's American. That's worldwide now. But that's Cherokee. But, I mean, it's like a fish in water. It's ubiquitous at this point. So many of the other words like hammock, raccoon, skunk, squash, those are Native American words that you would, I would consider possum, coon, squash, skunk, Southern terms. Those are native words.
Well, let me ask you about this one, Yona. So one time, my mamaw...
And of course, the Irish too, with the buggy. Like most places, you would get a shopping cart.
Yeah, it's a buggy.
Say, fetch a buggy. Go
get your buggy.
And another thing, instead of get a buggy or you get a buggy, I'd say fetch ye, fetch apostrophe ye, fetching's a buggy.
Yes, and you
ever hear people say thank you?
Okay, here's one that I get a kick out of. So it is, I was over yonder a while ago. And it's turning the whole a while ago into one phrase, a while ago. Now, here's a story. When I was a kid, I must have been in high school or something like that. And my grandmother was talking about something, my mama, and I said, what did you say? She said, I said it stinks worse than Kjarn.
Huh.
And I was like, what are you talking about? What is Kjarn? And she said, it's roadkill. And I was like, wow, I've never have heard this in my entire life. Well, then it was later that I heard the word carrion in association with roadkill, right? So then I was like, that must be the Appalachian abbreviation, or at least in some small areas, for Kjarn or carrion. And she called it Kjarn. Have you heard that one?
Kjarn would be out of Scottish. Kjarn Scottish.
Okay.
So again, because it's a linguistic isolate protected by the mountains and the rugged geography, much like the Newfoundland accent in Canada, which is also very, very heavy in the Irish and Scottish. Again, this whole, when the Scottish and Irish came into the mountains, they built cabins and they built stills and they made whiskey and moonshine. and everything else. And so much of the Appalachian culture of deer hunting and moonshining is taken straight out of the Cherokee economy and the Scottish economy of brewing spirits and everything else that leads to the whiskey tax rebellion and everything else. But at this point, we've reached the modern fight of our time, which again is, how do we protect the land that we live on and the resources that we have? Because from my professional lived experience as a land surveyor and a civil engineer, having worked with landowners in the development process, gone to the local county planning and zoning board meetings, when you have to ask and beg for forgiveness from the town fathers because you've decided that you would like to do something with property that you thought you owned in your name. Come to find out, in this point, there really is no such thing as private property. Owners, try not paying your taxes to the local county sheriff and see how long it takes to get a property tax lien. Anyways, I digress. I hate to burst bubbles here, but when you look at how the town fathers look at the land, and they've already decided, we're going to put a 4-lane road over there one day, and we're going to put an intermodal, and this is where we might sneak this next little data center in here, and we're not going to tell anybody about our brand new industrial park that we're going to do, and we're going to waive all of the requirements for zoning re-regulation for that because we're doing it.
And we're going to give them tax breaks for decades.
Right.
We're going to lie to the people and tell them that we're going to bring jobs here. And it's all going to be paid for off the backs of the taxpayers. And the other thing that they love to do is throw up solar farms. In Western North Carolina, there is a ton of solar farms. It reminds me of what you were talking about.
Ohio, too.
Yeah.
They're all over Ohio. That and windmills.
Yeah. So in Western North Carolina, like what you were saying that they did with the farmland, they, instead of flooding it, they just covered it in black solar panels.
Ugh.
Yeah, it's dreadful. And there's a lot of that there. And the other thing is that there's a lot of people that did inherit their parents, like some of the wealthier people that had hundreds and hundreds or thousands of acres, and then their children inherited it. They're selling it out to D.R. Horton so they can cram in 1,000 homes that look exactly the same in the area. And some places are fighting back. I was at a...
I want to end on with the land and Appalachia and Native Americans and our relationship to the land. Is basically, this is the fight that we face today, and it's the same fight as it was on day one. It's about the land, stupid. Nothing else matters. If you don't have the land, you don't have the water. If you don't have the water, you don't have life.
Yeah.
And it's really that simple. Unfortunately, we take the 7-generation view of, where is my great, 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 great grandchildren supposed to eat, hunt, drink, and grow crops? And the rich families like Commodore Vanderbilt and others, they take that long, long view of multi-generational wealth and how to provide it. But instead, as I learned being a county surveyor working in the courthouse, the ruling elites, they will tell the poor people, damn the Chinese, damn the North Koreans, damn all those commie pinko bastards. And then they meet every month in the city hall, and they've got maps of the entire city and county, and they alone, just 6 or 7 assholes, maybe a few bitches, sit around and decide what every last acre is and is not going to be used, and they don't give a damn who else claims to own it. How more communist could you possibly get? I'm getting agitated, I'm yelling, I'm screaming, but if there's one thing that drives me up the freaking wall, is this thing where people that, for a lot of people in the United States at this point, a lot of our friends and family members, may never own property. They may rent their entire lives. For those that have owned land or owned property, just owning property, it doesn't come with a manual. There's no class that you have your senior year of high school where they say, okay, when you become a fee simple title holder in real property, this is where you need to go to file your deed. And this is how you get. No. You just get to figure that shit out on your own. Surprise. And then you find out, wait a second, I don't actually own it if I don't pay the taxes for just 1 year of missed taxes. And you're
Correct.
selling on the courthouse steps. But I thought that I owned it. Or then you're like, okay, all right, I've got 10 acres. I've got some money. I'm going to build some apartments because the town needs housing. City says, no, you can't. The other side of the street can, but your side of the street is zoned agricultural. You'll have to come to 4 meetings and bring a lawyer and all this other stuff. And then maybe we'll let you do what you want with your own land, but maybe not.
Yeah.
But damn those communists in China.
Yep.
Yet there's literally a central communist planning committee in virtually every single municipality, county, parish, state, the entire freaking country.
Yes.
And that's what land surveyors and civil engineers deal with every single day. But let's go back to fantasy world, where we live in this make-believe democracy where your vote matters. And damn those communists and damn those Chinese. Now let me take my centrally planned road along my centrally planned water line to my centrally planned Walmart location with its centrally planned tax deductions so I can go into the shelves and get all of that made in China merchandise and then check myself out.
Exactly. And Yona, I have been at those the city council meetings. So I was in attendance of one where this exact situation that you're describing. So I had this piece of property that I had purchased from my aunt. Okay. And it needed to be cleaned up. Okay. So everything that needed to be done for demolition, you have to have a permit on file. Every single thing has to have a permit pulled, even though it's your own land, even though houses were already there before, right? So you have to have the demolition permit and the this permit and the that permit. And then when that was done, we wanted to put just a little single wide trailer there to have a place to stay when we went to Western North Carolina. Okay. Because it had been longer than 6 months from the demolition of a trailer that was already on the property, we had to go to this county commissioner's meeting. And this is rural North Carolina, supposedly better about stuff like this. Not at all. Go there and then present to the county commissioners and ask permission to get special zoning in order to put a single wide trailer on the land where a single wide trailer that was in horrible condition was already there. And members from the town had also come. It was a packed out meeting because they were protesting the exact thing that I told you about. These people that had land, they were trying to sell it to D.R. Horton. And so these people were getting rich off the sale of the land, but the townspeople were there because they were like, you have no plan in place. You have no plan for the roads, no plan for the schools, all these things, traffic, it's already maxed out. You have no plan, and yet you're going to let them come in here and build 100-some houses in this one little area. And because they were townhomes, they were able to work around the close to 1 acre rule that the county had. So most homes should be built on an acre. So anyway, it truly is like that.
What we're talking about is infrastructure spending. Okay, if each lot is over 30,000 square feet, which amounts to roughly 7/10 of an acre, then that's considered enough land under the current design standards for property subdivision and wastewater engineering that you can put in a lateral field and a septic tank, which means that you don't have to be connected to a municipal sewage system with the sewage treatment plant and everything else and a sewer bill. And so that's a way to skirt That's a way for the developer to skirt having to actually civilize or develop the land. Instead, here's vacant lot. It's over 7/10 of an acre. If you want to build there, you got to get the permit for your septic tank and lateral line. But I get to make the money subdividing the land, but I don't even have to build the road. I'll get the county to build the road. And that's for residential developers. It's even worse when you get to data centers and industrial and commercial developers, because more often than not, secretly, without any county commissioner board hearing, they just silently change the zoning because they got to eat shrimp and lobster last weekend.
That's it.
And then next thing you know, the city is getting federal grant money to upgrade the sewer line and sewage and everything else to go to an industrial park that just has a spec building on it and 5 other vacant industrial lots. And now they can go after and try and attract more jobs. And then, of course, the power electric substation, the lift station for the sewage and the wastewater lines, the water mains, the telecommunication lines, all of the infrastructure, not to mention the highways and storm drains and sidewalks and everything else, all of that paid for out of the public pocket so that they can then try and sell these industrial lots to job creators that the city will then lease to them for 99 years for $1 a year, and then they don't have to pay taxes. And it's just a way of extracting and sucking money out of each area. It's the corporate colonization of planet Earth. That's what I learned as a land surveyor. All these imaginary lines I would draw on the map to show this is that person's land and this is their land. And this is my land, this is your land, Woody Guthrie. That's Canada land, that's Mexico land. Well, until we invade Mexico for the 8th time, maybe we'll move it another 100 miles south again. Ha ha ha, why not? We've done it 6 times already. It's ridiculous. These lines don't mean anything when they need to launder money to their Swiss or Cayman bank accounts. These lines don't mean anything to the Canadian geese or apparently the Mexican screwworm or any other form of life that wants to travel back and forth across the border. Apparently, the only real restrictions to travel at this point are primarily for Americans and anyone that wants to come to or go from America, United States of America in particular. It's ridiculous how few Americans ever get a passport, much less ever use it. And we found out during this year's World Cup how hard it is to travel in and out of the country. Compound that with the fact that still to this day, Appalachia has the reputation of not the place you want to take a wrong turn. Not the place you really want to be after dark or be lost in.
Yeah, actually,
the South has, the deep South, the antebellum South with the big 2-story outdoor porches and, Scarlett O'Hara Gone with the Wind. They're known for Southern hospitality and that long Southern drawl. Howdy, y'all. Well, that's Southern drawl. Up here, it's yins or hisns, and it's going to be a long drive plumb down Florida and back. It's going to take you probably more than 10, 15 hours.
It is.
And so Appalachian is so different, and it's generally speaking, most mountain areas, it's not like this big Southern welcome and bless your heart. It's more like, who the fuck are you?
It really is.
First thing you'll hear is, well, you ain't from around here. Where
you
are
ain't
you
from around here, are you? Yeah.
That's bad. The first thing you hear when you're in the mountains, where are you from? Uh-oh. That's kind of like when you're a black dude in the wrong part of the South and they say, you lost, boy.
You're right. It is definitely a different part of that culture. It's hard people. Like whenever, like if my mom was talking about her grandmother, they didn't like her. She wasn't like that. Like what you're talking about, this warm Southern belle. These are hard people. They had a hard Scrabble life with poverty, with sharecropping, and it is a different vibe altogether.
And literally every single time a Johnny come lately has come over the mountain, people are raped, robbed, beaten, stolen from, and enslaved, and then have their land taken away. So where that has happened in Appalachia, century after century after century after century, we're going on 4 centuries now of being basically displaced from our land and forced to move around like gypsies from mine camp to sawmill camp to car job to sewing job to just like we're hillbillies are the gypsies of North America, like Jed Clampett all the way to Beverly Hills. I mean, it's again, it's because of the true nature of American empire, and that is it's always been about business. What distinguishes American empire, I think, from the French or the British or other empires is there's cool shit. They at least try to take care. I mean, that you look. I mean, granted, there's all kinds of criticisms to be made against Belgium and France and what they've done in Africa. But you look at those countries in Africa, and they have healthcare, and they have high-speed rail, and they have banking systems, and they have freeways with on-ramps and off-ramps and subways and metros and stuff and all that stuff all over Africa. It's all over South America. And it's like, I'm still to this day, having taught and been an expat, left Appalachia, traveled around the world as an Appalachian and a Cherokee, and come back to Ohio or the Ohio Valley. And it was such a kick in the balls. It was such a slap in the face to see how utterly third world Appalachia is. It's very, very, and I mean, you look at McDowell County, West Virginia. It's the poorest county in the entire United States. And it's got a per capita income getting close to Haiti. Like, I mean, it's staggering. It's a poverty I don't think people can really just even imagine. I mean, imagine an entire county of basically looks like homeless people, but they live in trailers and like it just. And so, the story of Appalachia going forward at this point, again, it's largely characterized today by cancers from the petrochemical industry and the mining industry. Very, very low life expectancy due to the number of premature deaths from drug overdoses, from pills and everything else. West Virginia State Attorney General actually won a lawsuit against the Sackler family, owners of Purdue Pharmaceuticals, makers of OxyContin, which you mentioned earlier. There's one town, with all due respect to Miss Piggy, Kermit, West Virginia, very small town on the Kentucky state line at the Big Sandy River. Kermit might have 800 people and one tiny little pharmacy. And I think that pharmacy in 1 year's time had 350,000 prescriptions written.
Yes. I'm so glad that you brought this up, because we did talk about this earlier before we even started our show.
Drug dealing.
Yes, 100%. And the other thing that I think is really crazy is the predatory nature. If you haven't looked at the damage that has been done to the Appalachian culture from OxyContin, from opioids, starting with Purdue Pharma and the Sackler family.
Well, it turns out it's deliberate. We found the receipts. There's several white papers that came out during discovery. For those that aren't familiar with the rules of civil procedure in the American court system, in a civil lawsuit, there's a procedure called discovery where you can have interviews and take depositions of prospective witnesses. You can subpoena records and such. And in so doing, they found out that very much so the banks and the energy companies, coal companies, have deliberately been trying to depopulate Appalachia ever since the Redneck Army fought the coal mines at Blair Mountain in 1920. There was a newspaper man in Boone, West Virginia, Madison County, or is it Madison County? Madison, West Virginia, Boone County, and up at the Logan County line, which is at Blair Mountain, is where the battle took place. But this is just after World War I. Most of these coal miners had survived trench warfare during World War I, and they actually still had their M1 Garands from World War I. And when they marched from Charleston into Madison and they came over the hill, the newspaper man said that it looked like a sea of rednecks because they all tied their handkerchiefs around their neck, in solidarity for all the miners that had just died in several catastrophic, easily preventable mine disasters in the southern coal field of West Virginia, that in just a couple weeks, several thousand miners had all been killed. And in response, when the women tried to fight back, they sent in kill squads, goon squads. Well, they were known as the Baldwin Felts Detective Agency. Carnegie liked to use the Pinkerton Detective Agency, the Pinkertons, but they're hired guns. Today, we would call them private contractors like Blackwater, but they're mercenaries. And they were brought into Matewan, West Virginia, and the people in Matewan were waiting for them. And that's when Sid Hatfield had the shootout. When Sid Hatfield was then brought up on trumped-up charges over in neighboring McDowell County, Welch, hometown of Steve Harvey show, he was then assassinated in broad daylight on the courthouse steps. Sid Hatfield, the sheriff of the town of Matewan. And so that's ultimately what led to the Redneck Army forming. They put their handkerchiefs around their neck and marched on Blair Mountain. And so the Redneck Army was about, the dignity of workers and the fact that our lives meant nothing. They were killing us thousands at a time, hundreds at a time. And ironically, of course, immediately after the Battle of Blair Mountain ended with the U.S. military being called in. General Billy, was it Billy Campbell or Billy Mitchell? General Billy Mitchell, I think, was, let me look that up there. He was World War I. Back then it was the U.S. Army Air Corps before the Air Force became separate. Let me see. General Billy Mitchell. Is it? Oh, I've still got it in Cherokee script. Let's go to English. Let's do it again. General Billy Mitchell. I'd like to get the name right. U.S. Air Force, Billy Mitchell, 1879, 1936. Mitchell served in France during World War I, and by the conflict's end, General Billy Mitchell commanded all American air combat units in the entire country. After the war, he was given all kinds of medals and blah, 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 blah. All right, let me see. World War I, returned from Europe, 1919. On July 1st, 1920, Mitchell was promoted to the regular Army rank of colonel in the Signal Corps, became the Assistant Chief of Air Service. On March 4th, 1921, he was appointed Assistant Chief of the Air Service by new President Warren Harding. Yes, it was General Billy Mitchell. I did remember correctly. So, I'm wondering if it's going to say anything about. We're still in 1921. I'm trying to look to see. He keeps doing bombing tests. Aha, here we go. You know what? Let me pull this up. Let me share the screen. Let's see. Share screen. So, twice the United States government has bombed its own people. The first time was in West Virginia in 1921 when they sent General Billy Mitchell, the World War I flying ace. He was sent in with the biplanes, like the ones that Snoopy fought the Red Baron with. And they literally dropped bombs on the Redneck Army. One of the dud bombs was brought into the Charleston courthouse, which kind of ended the whole sham prosecutions by the federal government against the soldiers. But when those World War I veterans were met by Army soldiers and the Army Air Corps, that ended the battle because they weren't going to shoot and kill their battle buddies. And that ended the battle. But let me see here what it says about good old General Billy Mitchell. Mitchell was dispatched by President Harding to West Virginia to stop the warfare that had broken out between United Mine Workers, Stone Mountain Coal Company, the Baldwin Felts Detective Agency, and other groups after the Matewan Massacre. Miners, outraged by the ambush slaying of Matewan Police Chief Sid Hatfield by agents for the coal company, marched on Mingo and Logan County, leading to the Battle of Blair Mountain. August 25th to September 2nd, 1921. On August 26th, Mitchell commanded Army bombers from Maryland to Charleston, West Virginia. Mitchell told the press that Army bombers alone could end the Mingo War by dropping tear gas on the miners. A private army of 3,000 led by Sheriff Don Chapin and financed by the Coal Operators Association engaged in gun battles and also used private planes to drop dynamite charges and World War I surplus gas and explosive bombs against an estimated 13,000 miners. Neither side responded to President Harding's August 30 proclamation to cease hostilities. In the last days of the civil disturbance, really? This is what we're going to call a civil disturbance. Yeah, I think I'm done reading that. Anyways.
And really quick, Yona, I wanted to say, so Hempcar in the chat said Tulsa and Move in Philadelphia in the 80s when they dropped a Satchel C4 on an apartment roost with a helicopter. That is 100% true. There was also around that time that we were talking about around World War I, where I believe it was Standard Oil that had this was like the rise of having this prominent PR spokesperson who was, I cannot remember the guy's name off the top of my head, but I do, Ivy Lee. Ivy Lee. So citizens had been massacred as well from Standard Oil, the people that were.
Well, I would distinguish or disambiguate them thusly in that with the Tulsa race massacre and some of the arson and terroristic bombings and such that were done both in Tulsa and also in Alabama and other parts of the South as well as the Move fire bombings in Philadelphia in the 1982 that burned down 2 city blocks in Philadelphia. I would largely characterize those as terrorist bombings, but that was the government or locals terrorizing and targeting specific locations. Whereas the aerial bombardment of the Redneck Army at the military Battle of Blair Mountain between a fighting force of over 5,000 with Team Coal Company and 13,000 armed miners and a sustained air campaign of biplanes and private planes dropping bombs from the sky for 2 weeks. That's the one and only time that the U.S. government has carried out an aerial bombing campaign with the military for weeks on end. So again, I do understand. Yes, there have been, the firebombing at Waco, the firebombing in Philadelphia, but that's just like a one-off thing. That's not like calling in the F-15s and literally having bombing campaigns for 2 weeks. It's crazy that most people don't know where the term redneck comes from or have heard of the Mingo War, which at the end of their little blurb, the Mingo War and 13,000 plus 6,000, so you've got almost 20,000 men fighting on the field of battle. You've got tanks, you've got bombs, you've got planes and bombing runs and all this stuff. And now it's just a civil disturbance. I would characterize a picket line or a protest with signs as a civil disturbance. 20,000 heavily armed men, biplanes and tanks and bombs and cannons being fired. That's way more than a civil disturbance. Way more. Calling in the entire Air Force and the Army to stop a coal mining army of 13,000 armed World War I veterans is way, way more than a civil disturbance. And the Redneck Army was so famous that the term redneck survives today. But what do they call it? The mystery hole. What do you call it? When you mystery hole history.
Oh, like when you memory hole?
Memory hole. When your memory, so much of the bloody, bloody labor history in Appalachia, in the steel mills, in the coal mines, in the sawmills, at the plantations, so much of that bloody labor history just never even happened.
Right. And I would say too, Yona, this was part of
redneck means you got a tan, right? Most people,
Yes.
you ask them, what does redneck mean? Oh, that's because your neck's red. No, it's not. You don't know what then you obviously don't know.
Right. And I would say that these types of events are really important to lead up to the modern version of propaganda that we have now, because at one time you did have muckrake journalists who were trying to expose the horrible working conditions that the average person was exposed to and actually fight the corruption. They were actually anti big business. And this is when people like Edward Bernays and Ivy Lee and all these other people come into play, and they do exactly what you said. They use every tool, every play in the playbook to dilute the message or dilute the history, to muddy the waters of people's understanding until it is forgotten. And then the spin is for the big business or big government or both. And so this was a really pivotal time for the propagandists to figure out exactly how do we manufacture consent for this war? How do we make people forget that this happened on our soil? And the other thing that I wanted to add, Yona, too, is when we're talking about the predatory nature of Appalachia being targeted, this was also the Sackler family. This was Purdue Pharma. They specifically looked for doctors in Appalachia that were more likely to prescribe pain medications such as Vicodin and things like that. So they were looking for the ones that had the higher scripts of those types of medicines, because they had been catering to people that their bodies were broken by coal mining, by all this other stuff. And they targeted those doctors. And then they come with these pretty hot young saleswomen and their kickback bonuses and their vacations and their Purdue Pharma ink pens and all these things, and get them to prescribe. And they tell them that it's not addictive. And then the next thing you know, there is a giant opioid crisis in Appalachia. And then, of course, it spreads from there. It was very, very predatory.
The demographics along the United States, and in particular the U.S. states that are east of the Mississippi River going to the Atlantic Ocean, there's one and only one state that sticks out like a sore thumb, where there is, for the last 50 years, a constant negative population rate. The only state that continues to hemorrhage people and lose population year in, year out, decade in, decade out is West Virginia. That is by design, very deliberate policy. We have the receipts. Just like the way Cubans disrespected the benevolence of the New York banking elite class to support Fidel Castro in the expulsion of the Americans in the Bautista junta. And to this day, the United States and the New York banks have never forgotten this disrespect from Cuba. To this day, we have the embargo against them. And fuck you, Cuba. We're going to reinvade you one of these days, you cockroaches. I mean, it's outright, like, how butthurt could you possibly be? Well, in the same way, the New York bankers have a major hard-on against the hillbillies. How dare we raise an army of 20,000? But what did you think was going to happen? The last time the New York bankers tried to come kick our ass is when Alexander Hamilton, proposed putting a tax on whiskey. And he's going to get all of the Scots, Irish, and the Cherokee people in Appalachia to pay for the war with England by taxing the whiskey, because we didn't even have any money to take from us. So they're going to take the whiskey that we were bartering and trading with. That led to the Whiskey Tax Rebellion, which we won and they lost. And we actually won the Battle of Blair Mountain. So twice the people of Western Pennsylvania and Western Virginia, now West Virginia, twice the Appalachian community has taken up arms and fought tooth and nail and beat the U.S. government. And Yona, so that's why they have the Sacklers and others, the poisoning and destruction of West Virginia, the deliberate environmental poisoning with the chemicals, the chemical industry, the mine runoff, the pharmaceuticals, the fentanyl, everything. It's like a rich kid with a magnifying lens that's burning ants. And that's what they've been doing to West Virginia. There's a reason why we're sitting on gold and silver and cobalt and some of the best coal on planet Earth. Some of the most mineral-rich land on the entire planet, yet it's the poorest part of the entire country. And that's why it's being depopulated on purpose. And why are they depopulating Western Carolina and West Virginia and Western Virginia? Because it's a land grab. Here come the Ohio plates and the Florida plates and the New York plates. And insert name here: Maggie Valley, Greensboro, Winston-Salem, Asheville, Murphy,
all the things.
Everywhere, Bryson City, everywhere you go.
Yes.
Everywhere you go.
And Yona, this has been
Hickory and Boone.
And Hickory and Boone, 100. And this has been what you're describing is exactly my sentiment. And what I had thought about it is because they knew, this is my opinion, the type of people that are from Appalachia. And we've been talking about that, right? And so they did not ever want to have a population that could do exactly what you described, which is to have resistance to X, Y, and Z, whatever they're doing. I always have felt that is exactly why Appalachia was targeted from the Sackler family with the opioid epidemic. And I want to encourage people, if you have not read or listened to, the audiobook's pretty good too. The book.
Look at where they sold all the pills, Ashley. Kermit, Crum, Williamson, Matewan, Welch. The very exact same communities in the southern coal belt of West Virginia, where Sid Hatfield was killed. where the redneck fighters were trying to get to those people in the southern coal field. And they just keep getting what was it? George Orwell said, imagine a view of the future being a black boot stomping on your face forever. The black boot has been stomping on the face of Appalachia ever since the first coal mine was opened. And it's incredible. They've got this organization called Friends of Coal. And they put on Hank Williams Jr. concerts in Boone or Hickory or Pigeon Forge or Pikeville, Kentucky, or wherever, Williamson, West Virginia, Logan, and these big Friends of Coal, because, you want to support the coal company. And it's like, how can you support the coal companies if you actually are a coal miner or a coal mining family? All they've done is enslave people, destroy the land, and they literally will kill every one of you if they had the chance. And every chance they've had, they have killed as many as possible. I mean, our lives literally mean nothing to these people. And it's not just the magnates. It's not just the oligarchs and the tech bros. That's what I found out being a land surveyor in Appalachia, working on all these little podunk ass courthouses with the county commissioners and the planning and zoning boards. They all have the same freaking mentality. You and I are talking about history and our lives and families and stuff. And we just want to get along. I want to survive the next day to the next day. And I want my kids to be happy and healthy. That's really all I'm cared and concerned about. To hear these people talk, well, this is what we need to do with every last acre in that valley. And this is where we need to move industrial development over here. And we're going to play God with the entire watershed, because it's going to make me money and my brother money and my sister money. And we're going to make all the money off all these land deals and fuck all the rest of these people.
Yeah, which is why
every single town. That's what makes the American Empire different from French Empire, Spanish Empire, British Empire. What makes American Empire different is it's not about a democracy. It's not about a civilization. It's not about leaving long-lasting, well-maintained infrastructure. The railroads are built to get the timber out, to get the coal out. The highways are built to get the stuff out. And they'll just, at this point, they're letting everything go to rack and ruin and potholes. But they'll build a brand new 4-lane road to the data center. And they'll build a new water tower for the data center.
Yep.
Because they're all making money off of it. It's just gross corruption. Trump alone made over $1.5 billion off his crypto deals last year. Normally, when the president of the United States has to do financial disclosure, it's a page, 2 pages. I think the last one from Drone Obama was 4 or 5 pages. Biden was getting into 10, 15 pages. His disclosure was, I think, over 160 pages of nothing but violations of the emoluments clause between him and Jared and Don Jr. and Eric and the rest. It's gross and obscene corruption on such a biblical scale.
100%. And it's really, this is what I think when we see so many events that seem to be happening in isolation, right? Like the data centers or the conflict with Iran or the scamdemic or whatever we want to call it. When you look closely, every single time, it is exactly what you are describing, which is a wealth transfer. Every time to bleed the working class dry. That is it. Every time.
I'll tell you another thing. The flock cameras and the data centers and the surveillance state is all part and parcel. It's all one and the same. And the areas with all of the high security and fencing and flock cameras and geofencing and everything else in place, those will be the exclaves where Richistan plans to expand, because not all of the United States looks like third world bumfuck West Virginia. You can go to parts of Dallas and Houston, Texas, and You can go to parts of North Carolina where they're building new freeways, building whole ass new parts. I mean, they're building freeway interstate ring roads around virtually every town in North Carolina at this point. North Carolina is like on an interstate rampage right now, building freeways all over.
Oh,
I-74,
100.
I-73,
They're turning
I-77.
Charlotte to Raleigh into a mega city. That is
Yeah.
what they're doing. They are cramming everything, all the homes, all these big giant like shipping centers. They're filling it up from Raleigh to Charlotte.
I
It's
mean, from the Research Triangle and like Cary all the way to Mecklenburg County, it's just one big city now.
Yes.
Continuous city.
Yes.
And so, there are exclaves of Richistan across Slavelandia where they, they're doing some development and some infrastructure, but it's mainly just roads, maybe some water lines. Not really seeing much update to the sewer systems. Not really seeing much update at all to the railroad system.
Right.
Right, the opposite. Although I will say North Carolina is, again, an outlier. North Carolina and Virginia both have, their state governments have been spending a lot of money on state-supported passenger rail services. And so there is quite a few passenger trains that shuttle back and forth between Charlotte and Raleigh every day, as well as from Charlotte to Boston, the Carolinian. That's a Carolina state-supported route. Carolina's looking to expand rail. Virginia has been even more aggressive with that. So, were it not for Senator Robert Byrd in West Virginia, there wouldn't even be Amtrak running through West Virginia anymore. They somehow got the New River National Gorge made a national park, which is kind of strange because the New River Gorge was clear cut and strip mined aggressively. And what they have for national park land right now, you can tell with the really, really small 6-inch oak trees and stuff. It's like a lot of that land looked like it was just clear cut 20 years ago. So maybe in 100 years, it'll be a nice national park. But right now, it's a terribly devastated natural wonder that's in recovery right now.
Yeah.
The story of West Virginia really, to me, is kind of a mask off of what the United States has really always been about. The railroad tracks, the freeways, the canals, the big dams, the electric power plants, all the cool shit that you would have thought that every other country has, we should still have if we were actually about civilization, if we were about
100
lives or development. But the fact that they tear out the canals, they tear out the railroads, they let the roads go to shit, they just don't care. When you have Hurricane Helene and people are trying to help out and pool up rescue supplies, and instead of helping or facilitating that, they send a black hawk to rotor wash and knock over all the tents and tables where they're trying to give out food because they're not on the approved fucking FEMA list. It's part of my language, but you're not an approved
Speak
FEMA
freely.
list. I mean, oh my God. They're like, oh, you built this temporary bridge over the left fork of French Broad River. You didn't get a permit. We're going to take that out. It's like, but that's the only way we can get there because all the state road bridges are washed out and we at least get a four-wheeler or a side-by-side. It's just,
or the donkeys from the Cajun Navy.
I mean, it's just crazy. The last point I would make in the show would be the whole point of the data centers collecting the data, running the surveillance state, taking in all of the camera feeds. It's all about depopulation. That's what the cameras were used for along the east side of the Berlin Wall in East Berlin and East Germany. That's what the cameras were used for in South Africa. That's what the cameras are used for all across Zone A, Zone B, and Zone C of the West Bank of the Jordan, along with the Gaza Strip. And of course, ironically, well, not ironically, Palantir and Flock and the rest of them. It's amazing all the ties to Israel and these surveillance technate states. So, when people talk about Planet Gaza, for me, I look at what happened to the Cherokee Nation. If we go back to the beginning of tonight's program, what was the Cherokee Nation is parts of 7 different U.S. states today. And all of a sudden, we were cut into 2 pieces. And you had the little strip down in, you had the Georgia strip, and then you still had the West Carolina. So we had West Carolina and the Georgia strip, much like the Palestinians were Nakba'd and pushed over to the West Bank and the Gaza strip. And then that wasn't good enough, and then you all had to leave. And so again, as a Cherokee, I see everything that Israel is doing. The United States has done the same exact thing. It's no wonder why America and Israel are almost like a total and complete mirror image. And so it's going to come. There's almost a day of reckoning. One of these days, as people are getting more and more pissed off about what Israelis are doing to Palestinians and Lebanese and all their other neighbors, maybe more and more people are going to draw the connection that the United States did the exact same fucking thing. America is the promised land. Yay! I mean, William Bradford at Plymouth Plantation, Jamestown, those people are saying the same fucking thing. Well, God promised this land to us. This is our promised land. It's what the King and Queen of England are saying when they're writing away the land grants to the settlers in the colony of Rhode Island and Providence Plantation, the official name of that state. Well, at least until 3 years ago, they finally dropped the Providence Plantation part because, it's still on the state seal. They literally have a plantation on the state seal, the state of Rhode Island and Providence Plantation. Because, spoiler alert, shocker, there were slaves from Maine to Florida and indentured servants. I mean, to me, it's just they're one and the same.
Well,
Most
I think,
indentured servants never got their freedom.
and I think that you, the parallels that you're drawing, of course, are very good and very important. And I think that that's one of the reasons why so much of the history has been diluted and attempted to be erased, because they don't want people making those connections. That's what I think. They don't want
That's
people aware of their
absolutely
history.
what it's
They don't
about.
want people to have a rebellious spirit because of and trying to hold on to their heritage for all these reasons. It's
And that's
damaging
what
to the
defines
establishment.
being an American. After I mentioned July 4th, 1676, 350 years ago, when white, black, red, all these other things, which gets to the whole question of where did these terms of white, red, black, yellow come from? Well, come to find out, at the time of Nathaniel Bacon's Army of the Poor rebelling, Bacon's Rebellion, 1676, there was no such thing as white people. The term hadn't been invented yet. It was the British colonial government of Virginia in Richmond and the Virginia House of Burgesses in 1706 that came up with the racial laws. And they were the ones that created the term white and then defined how white you had to be in order to still be considered white, and how black was mixed, and how, and how much black could you be, and how much Indian could you be. And so now every single Native American is just red. Every single European speaking 35 different languages, you're just all white people now. all 250 African tribes in your languages. You're just all black people now.
Yep.
And you're not allowed to marry, and you're not allowed to marry, and you're not allowed to marry, and you're not allowed to associate with one another. And we're going to keep all the poor people separated by their skin color. And that was something that the British Empire invented out of thin air. They wrote it on whole cloth in 1706. And ever since then, Americans, and now largely the West in general, views human life through Crayola crown colors. Because it was the British crown that invented color as race and ethnicity. To keep the poor from ever banding together and burning down the houses of the rich ever again. And it's worked.
It has worked.
For 300 years, it's worked great.
Welcome to identity politics. That is one of the many, many, many ways that people are used, or that's used against the people to see them as the other, instead of seeing us as the working class, the people that are being, treaded on, basically, and to prevent alliance and working together to protect family, ourselves, our land.
Ironically, Appalachia, as we move forward in time with ever crazier weather, ever more frequent storms, ever hotter summers, ever longer droughts, Appalachia is an oasis of endless running water and cooler shade trees, and will truly be the oasis of civilization for North America for centuries to come, as we could possibly see some expanding desertification and dust bowling again of the Midwest and the Southwest. It's already an issue in Arizona, New Mexico, West Texas, even getting into Oklahoma, Kansas. We're seeing Colorado. They're all dealing with desertification. And the Dust Bowl was bad, and they've done a lot to try to stop it with the winds. But, we still have many Dust Bowls, and they'll be, if we get into a really bad drought over the Oglala Aquifer again, it'll Dust Bowl all over again, even worse.
For sure. And we here in North Carolina, especially in central North Carolina, we're in exceptional drought. Yeah. And as you know, right now. And the entire East Coast is suffering, obviously, probably the whole country, but from an enormous heat wave. And
it is really bizarre. I've been looking at the rainfall totals over the last 90 days. And for some strange reason, despite all of these rock'em sock'em storms that have been just dumping loads of water, every single one of them has missed the same freaking spot in North Carolina. For some reason, between Asheville and Raleigh and down to Charlotte and over to Saluda and back up to Asheville, that little rectangle area has managed to avoid any major rainstorm crossing over it in 3 months. But literally on all four sides, it's just been a nonstop convoy, like a train of storms all around. But they just keep missing that part of Carolina, and so it's really weird. And then, of course, there's three other major droughts out west, but North Carolina is alone on the East Coast as having this weird. It really doesn't make any sense. It's very weird.
And here's something interesting, Yona. Even back into January, when we were gearing up for major winter weather, right? Which is pretty unusual this far into, obviously in the mountains, you do have it. But as far as like central North Carolina, it's unusual these days. Well, we're gearing up for this big storm, and they described what they referred to as a maybe did they call it a dry patch or something like that? But it was basically along like in central North Carolina,
Uh-huh.
Burlington over to Raleigh, and that
That's
has
right.
maintained this entire time, like
For 3
barely any
months. It's been
rain.
over 90 days, almost,
Yes.
it's nearing 100 days of this dry patch that every single storm has been missing.
Yes.
I'm really glad you brought that out. It's really, really bizarre.
It is bizarre, and it will go like what you're describing. It'll go all around, but like we need it bad and cannot buy it. But we've got over 100-degree temperatures. So
Yeah, I got up to 108 today, but I think the future of Appalachia, the truth is, Appalachia is the most valuable land in all of the East United States. It's higher ground. There's caves, there's cooler temps, and more importantly than anything else, there's mountain springs, reliable year-round water that
yes,
never runs dry, and that's what makes it more valuable, quite frankly, than practically any other part of the United States. Because although there are some seismic faults and some tectonic action, New Madrid earthquake was pretty bad, but that's all the way at the Mississippi River, 1812 last time you had a earthquake on that fault. So I mean, granted, as we saw with Hurricane Helene, when you get 30 inches of rain in 5 hours on any part of the mountains, it's going to lead to not just a flood, because I think when people talk about the Hurricane Helene flooding, they just get the mental image of like maybe a tidal wave of water. But it's not water that bulldozed all of these concrete bridges and buildings off of their foundations. There was massive landslides and rock slides.
It was a topographical change to the map.
So there's huge mudslide and landslide scars that run, some of them for over 20 miles, where it begins at the top of the mountain and it just builds up and builds up, and next thing you know, you've got it all the way across the valley. There's not actually that much water involved. It's mainly boulders and logs, and they just completely destroyed everything like bulldozers coming down the valley. It's totally different from it. Trust me, if it had just been water and water flooding, most of the structures would still be there. They would just have mud lines where you could see where the high water mark was. With the Hurricane Helene disaster, many of those hollers, there's nothing left. Nothing, because it was not a water flood. There's flooding and rain, but you're talking about rock slides and mudslides that traveled down hollers for 2 miles, 10 miles. Some of them were 15, 20 miles.
Devastating.
There was a rock slide that went down the Nolichucky River that destroyed about 40 miles of the railroad. I made a song and a video about it, featuring one of the Cherokee tribal members from Cherokee, North Carolina. I've made a number of songs about that, and I didn't really plan on playing any of my music, but when I talk about Appalachia, the most Appalachian songs I've ever made were about Hurricane Helene. I made 3 different songs after it. One, the Ida May, which is like a gospel hymnal. You'll hear it and it's sung in the bluegrass style.
That was my great grandmother's name, by the way.
Oh yeah, Ida May, yeah, and that's the song. Well, I think obviously that's the one I have to play. I was going to play Ginseng, But I think item A definitely we're going to have to. I'll have to find that there. Let me go over here. Wow, look at that monster crowd on Rumble. I did do a little bit of promotion. I'm glad to see all my homies and friends come out. Wow.
Definitely. Yeah, actually, while you pull that up, let me go ahead and shout out the people that
Good
I
Lord,
have
look at the
seen in the
crowd.
chat. So we had Jason Barker, Doc Spoiler, Doug Lug, Sweets, Sherry M2, D2T, Skunk Hollow Rose Gardens, Bronx Stomper, Dustin Helm, Nostradamus, Conspiriality, Karen Carpenter, Ghost Art, SMU Hasky, Faber Lignarius, Spirit of the Age, Nature Boy Dave of Third Rail, Hemp Car, Andy VW, Billy Ray Valentine, and Greg Talent. And I think I caught everybody, but if I missed you, I apologize, because I do want to say, as I say every single week, and I really mean it, thank you so much for being here. It means so much that you would choose to spend your time with us. So thank you very, very much.
Well, I think if we learned anything from Hurricane Helene and the Appalachian community, it's that Appalachia has always taken care of its own. It's a very, very close knit, tightly drawn community, and quite self sufficient. There's whole parts of Appalachia still to this day that are off grid that have never yet to be on grid. And so, drawing water from a well, cutting firewood, living in a cabin, using an outhouse, no indoor plumbing. That's still a thing. And it's not for romantic purposes. But again, the accent's dying. I'm largely responsible for that with not passing it down to my kids. But I mean, I don't know. It's not looked at the same way. And I mean, I don't even want to speak it right now, but I mean, it's nonetheless, this is the item A remix of Turtleback and Shell. Because I think of Appalachia as basically a big turtle shell. And every now and then the arms and the head will poke out and it'll move around a little bit. But at the first sound of anything, back inside the shell. And I think that kind of describes most Appalachians in general. I mean, I know that I'm describing myself really. Just because most time carpetbaggers and new money coming into town, it always spells bad.
Yeah.
You're going to rape my sister or her sister? Who are you going to beat up, and whose land are you going to steal? And it's just it's the same story over and over and over and over and over again.
Yeah, there's a built-in cynicism for sure.
And so despite all of that, and despite the catastrophic loss of life and property and injuries and everything else, being the poorest region in the entire country, despite all of that, it's rebuilding. Now, the real question is, especially when you look at Asheville and the reconstruction efforts around Buncombe County, who are they rebuilding it for? But that's a whole nother issue.
It really is, but you bring up a great point, because there is such a gentrification that has happened in these progressive spots. So Asheville is the one that's more well-known, certainly, but this is happening in, like what you talked about, in Maggie Valley and in Flat Rock and Hendersonville and Boone. I mean, these places are considered, like, they were what Yona's talking about. They were part of the Appalachian Mountains. They were of those people. And now the culture is really changing so much to these very progressive cities from people who don't necessarily have an appreciation for the culture, for the history.
And it's gotten deep in the mountains too, like Silva. Silva has been gentrified to death. Bryson City. I mean, all of these areas.
Yes.
It's nuts. All the way through the Nantahala.
Yeah.
Anywho, this what I tried to do with this video is I wanted to show like a before and after, and go around and so this is the second in a series of songs I made about Appalachia. In fact, I've probably got enough songs I've made about Appalachia now to make a full Appalachia mixtape. So that's probably something I should work on. The idea was born here. With that, let's go to Turtleback and Shell Ida Mae remix. Shout out to Ida Mae and Ashley. Let's see here.
My born to die, to lay this body down, and must my trembling spirit fly into a world all and all mistreated, unpierced by human thought, but well, that's kind of like a dry. I guess out of the three songs I made, I would call this the dry song because the other two feature the flooding scenes, and I don't think, you know, after seeing this video, the before and after, I just don't think it's impactful. I guess I will share a little bit of the ginseng.
Yeah,
Here.
let's do it.
Because I've got an interview of one of the locals from Buncombe County who was basically a neighbor and ended up being a de facto first responder. But this is called Odaskali or Sang root, ginseng. And this song I actually wrote in Appalachian and I sang in Appalachian. So I guess it is fitting. That's why I decided to go ahead and whip it out, because it's songs about Appalachian. It's one of the few songs where I sang in a twang. So let's see here. This song for Cecil Hill. Yeah. Murphy Creek.
really hard to put into words. Hundreds of miles of roads, hundreds of bridges taken out, complete loss of infrastructure, not to mention water lines, power lines. There's Lake Lure.
Just country God below you. If the waters fall just like a fountain, wash it all away.
Biltmore Village.
Jesse, what can you do? Just wash it all away. What can you do?
The only other videos I've seen like this are like the tsunami footage in Japan. It's crazy.
All these broken trees and many colored leaves all blow around in the breeze. Fresh scraped up. What can you do, Jesus? What can you do?
Yeah, that vehicle you see in that landslide, that we saw the camera from the back window on that landslide on the interstate highway. I mean, all the interstates are washed out in the road. It's crazy. See, this is what I'm talking about, Ashley. That's not water.
So they
Those are
popping hands like all
mudslides.
the wildlands. Everything leaves. Broken trees, many colored leaves, all blow around in the breeze. Take that boy out to get back. Dragging in Freshfield, St. Red sack. Be back next year, Lord allow. Bunch of poor prom up the shack. Ain't no worry on the mountain. Just country God below you. If the waters fall just like a fountain, wash it all away, Jesse, what can you do? Just wash it all away, what can you do? All these broken trees and many colored leaves all blow around in the breeze. Fresh scraped up. What can you do, Jesus? What can you do?
That's the old Kentucky River across the Carolina line. The river that's only 100 feet wide and also 2 miles wide. Floating entire trailers down the river. Right? Whole house. Like, I got another video where there's like entire houses being floated away.
Bunch of poor prom up the shack.
Yeah,
So one of the stories that I heard that was frightening about that was from one of my friends. Actually, my ex brother-in-law works with Appalachian Electric Power, AEP, Old Dominion Power, um, and because whenever there's like a ice storm or whatever, they send their trucks around to help restore power around the country, their linemen and everything. That's what he does. And he was telling me that when they were going to restore some of the rural electric lines um, out in Jackson County, Swain County, North Carolina, which is around the Qualla boundary, Cherokee Res, um, they were finding parts of human remains in the tree tops, like 30, 40 feet above the little 10-foot wide creek. But that one day, however many months ago it was now, the water was 30 feet tall down that holler. It's crazy. Like, I mean, just like finding a hand or like they found a baby's leg. Like, I mean, it's insane. It's
yeah, it was terrible. It was a terrible tragedy. Devastating to like what you said, it's not just flooding, which is devastating in and of itself. This is complete topographical change that just happened just like that.
Well, it's because of the mudslides, the landslides, and the rock slides that made it so catastrophically damaging. Because water flooding, generally speaking, if you're not right in the main current, if you're just getting backwater flooding, it's not going to do that much damage. But where all these bridges were taken out and all of these buildings were taken off their foundation, that's because there was so much being moved inside this just catastrophic flash flood. But of course, Hurricane Helene hit at the worst possible time in Western Carolina because it had already been raining for weeks on end. The ground was already super saturated. The creeks were already flooding. And then got some areas 24, 30 inches in the space of 5 or 6 hours.
Yeah.
And that's why, with the ground being super saturated, all the mountain being just soaked for 2 solid weeks, and the creeks already almost out of their banks, to then have this land-based hurricane intensify over land, which is not really normally a thing. Normally when a hurricane makes landfall, it goes from 3 to 2 to 1 tropical storm and farts out. But not this time. Somehow, some way, it got its second life around the Carolinas, and then just boom, just dumped 2-3 feet of rain on Asheville. And then I was doing DoorDash on the Ohio River in Portsmouth, Ohio, when it hit. And in 3 hours, they got 6.5 inches of rain. And there was catastrophic flooding in Portsmouth, and like on the main road, US Route 23, it was flooded in several places. And I started fighting my way north to Columbus to try to get away from the flooding. And I didn't realize until I was up to Chillicothe, and then I started hearing the news reports that, oh, that was Hurricane Helene. And then they're like talking about it really messed up Virginia and Carolina and Tennessee. And then I got home and then I saw the footage. I was like, oh my God. Like what it did to the Cherokee Res is just unbelievable. Took out all the, anyways,
yeah, it was incredible and really stalled out, and just was raining and raining. But okay. So we have been going for, this is my longest show ever, Yona, which I know.
Sorry.
No, don't apologize at all. No. Do not apologize. I have loved this conversation. But I was looking at your episode from this past week, and I think it's like 6 hours long. And
Well,
I
to
think
be fair, there's not that much talking because when I do my shows, I have 40 minutes of a pre-show where people hang out in the chat, and I just have it's like MTV, well, old MTV back when they played music videos. It's just music videos. And then at 8 o'clock, I have Headline USA with Ken Silva, Jose Nino, and New Number 6. And I go through his little blurbs and everything. I think Ken was just interviewed by Tucker recently.
yes,
I can watch
I
that.
think it was discussing the Trump assassination.
Yes, yeah. Ken's been doing a lot of work on that, but Ken and Jose and Six, and so I show his latest news pieces that Six has done with Headline USA. Because my shows, I've got my own channel, and then I simulcast on other networks with the New Prisoners Network, and then normally after about 15 minutes, so around 8:15 or so, then I'll have my panel of guests, and sometimes the women outnumber the men, which is normally a good thing. I like to hear more points of view. But typically about an hour and a half, maybe as much as 2 hours. Every now and then we might go maybe a little over 2 hours with the panel, but by that point I'm ready to go to the after show where I play more music videos. Generally just my videos, although, I've done some other things. I've put more Headline USA clips through the post-show videos. I've played other artists in the post-show videos. Sometimes that'll last for an hour or two. Sometimes it goes for 3 or 4 hours and people are hanging out in chat. And it's really fun with with my music and everything because working in other languages, and just being able to having the total freedom to create whatever I want to create. I used to really dread having to make the music videos. It was just a really tedious afterthought because it turned out with Instagram and a lot of these other websites, there was no way for me to just simply share an MP3. It had to be a video file, which forced me every time I make a song, I've got to go make a music video. And then that was a whole nother skill set that I had to learn in terms of video editing and everything else, the formats and bit rates and everything that I pull with. It's just learning curve. Every day I'm learning new stuff and learning curve. And, but I mean, it helps. I mean, I was like, for example, my friend Zoe, she does her show Thrill Kill Medical Cult. And
Yeah, we just talked to Zoe a couple weeks ago for maybe the second or third time since I've been on nights, and she's great. She's really great.
She's also a musician and a vocalist, and has worked with a number of bands. And she did a cover song, like a kind of like a Weird Al type parody type cover of the Kinks' My Sharona, just like Weird Al's My Bologna, but it's Lies Corona. And
that's so good.
and so she had laid down new vocals for it and had the original, just basically what she sent me was 2 tracks, the Kinks basically karaoke version instrumental, and then her a cappella vocal, which was pretty tight. I mean, it was a good recording, mono, so I was able, take a clean recording and then add the reverb and master the vocal, and then go through and painstakingly chop the vocal track into 30 different little pieces and then drag some of the words over so that it hit right on the beat of the snare. But I never do, like, I mean, I've produced, I think with her, she was the 10th artist, maybe the 12th artist that I've produced beside myself, their records. And, again, that's another skill set I learned. I've been a lead singer and I've been a songwriter for many years, but the 7 other bands I was in before now, was always about doing gigs and cover songs. Almost never did original music ever. And anytime we wanted to record something, we would go to a studio and record. And so all of a sudden, with COVID shutting down live performing, I'm like, what is this whole thing with DAW? What is that? Digital audio workstation. What is this? Oh, wow. Well, I guess, maybe I can figure out how to record myself. Well, then it's like, and then I got to the point where, you know what? I'm not doing cover songs anymore. I'd rather make up my own stuff, write my own lyrics. I can record my own violin parts and piano parts and do it all and mix it together and add Hurricane Helene. And there you go. There's ginseng.
There you go.
I've gotten to work, with Bandcamp and other places. People have been able to help me, which has been a real godsend because I suffered a car crash on my last DoorDash in Cincinnati when it totaled the car and broke the bones in my neck. And I had a neck brace on for over a year. And 2 hernias. I've gotten my hernia surgeries done. My neck is largely healed, still going through physical rehab, and I don't have full movement. And every time it pops, I'm like freaked out, like, oh my God, thank God, can I still feel my fingers and toes? Because doctors put the pirigotomy where the bone spurs are in the spinal cord. They're like, if you take one wrong step, you could be paralyzed or dead. I'm like, yeah, I get it. I've seen the x-rays. I get it. But God loves me and I'm still here. So, but, thanks to Bandcamp and, I always draw a blank when I have to think about money, but like, not Venmo. Yeah. Venmo, PayPal, Cash App. There's all these different places. There used to be another one, not Zillow. That's the one for.
It was Zelle.
Yeah. Zelly or Zelle. That was before my bank decided to unbank me. Because I have been such a truthy musician and I've done so many shows and I've had so many of my YouTube channels yeeted. And I mean, you can still, if you put in Yona Aniwodi on YouTube, you'll probably find some of my 10, 15,000 view interview shows that I've done before. And I used to have thousands of subscribers on YouTube and was making money. And
the power of censorship. Yep. Yeah.
That's before I got deplatformed and demonetized and everything else. But
yeah,
at least with what's really cool about music, because I love history and I'm trying to struggle against this oppression and dystopian surveillance technique that's being forced down our throat. And my first plan of attack was I'm going to write articles and see if I can't get published in some of these magazines and newspapers. Yeah. And then I'm going to start sending telegraphs and Morse code. I'm going to get the message out there, man, and then realize, most people see an article, even if it's one that they like, where I'm breaking down the Rockefellers. We're in the TLDR era.
100%.
Can I listen to it? Like, is there an audio version? That way I can keep doing 2 other things and then I'm just not even hearing what's even being said. Yes. So again, it's like, so I'm like, how do I get people to lock in and zone in? I've got to get people into the zone. And so then I'm like, well, instead of writing a long story, I'll do like a column, like a series. Or, well, I'll just go back to doing the poems. No, newspapers and magazines aren't really, it's just not getting it done. And then credit where it's deserved. It was Richard Grove and Glory Jones who dragged me by each arm onto the internet to start my own podcast. They said, you got so much information and so much talent to share. You should do your own show, Yona. I'm like, well, I don't really care. And they're like, and you'll be able to get viewers and you'll get money. And yeah, I don't really care. But I mean, I'm having fun. So, why not? And then it was really initially Drizzle and two other guys at Grand Theft World that started playing my songs and playing my music, which then was just enough encouragement. I think where I really turned the corner was the song that I co-wrote with Glory Jones, who's the co-host with Steve Poikonen on Slow News Day. And she also did a show with Comrade Misty. I remember that show she did with Misty there for a while. I don't know. We're all over the place. But when I did because Glory helped me write this song for Food Not Bombs, Keith McHenry and Commander X and all that stuff that was going on with them and Free Assange and, just the getting to collaborate with all of the talented people all in our little online community here of sorts really led me to go more and more into music and to just abandon writing and to just focus on trying to make new music that's good enough that people will dance and vibe to it to the point that I can then start sprinkling in my little subliminal messages. Some songs I don't, I leave my foot off the pedal altogether. Other times I stomp on the pedal. So, some songs like Quarantine Dream or the Ralph Barrick remix of the mRNA song, I'm like at Spinal Tap 11 with the truthiness. But, other times, I just, I'd always been a musician playing trumpet and piano and singing. But it wasn't until I began working with DAWs or DAWs and remixing other artists that I started to finally sample and mix my own music, which led me into electronic music. And then I'm like, oh my God, I've always loved this song by ABBA, and I love this song by PM Dawn, and I love this song by Pink Floyd, and I love this song by Wu-Tang. And then now I can sample this and that and this and that and put it all together and make my own song. And this is awesome. And it's so much fun. And so, when people say, well, what kind of music do you make? I always ask, well, what do you want to hear? Like,
Right.
I got country, I got rock, I got heavy metal, I got rap, I got most of what I do these days is like, I would say like probably like tech house or maybe tribal house, just dance music, I guess, EDM. I don't know. I don't know with the labels, but I really got turned on to being a DJ because having been a live performer and a lot of people just drinking beer or a few people shuffling around or dancing, it's totally, totally different the first time I actually got to man the turntables and DJ a set. And, typically when a DJ has a song bank of, 30 or 50 songs that they're going to, bounce between turntables and mix different songs together, songs of the day that everyone wants to hear and dance to. And that's typically what a dance DJ will do. They may have a few songs that they've done of their own, but generally speaking, they're trying to go through the top 40 dance songs of the day or the top 40 of all time to keep people dancing. You don't want people sitting on leaning against the wall or sitting at the tables. You want people dancing. If you're a good DJ, ask Angry Tiger. You want to keep people dancing.
Yes.
Keep the feet moving. And so I always took the take of, well, if I'm going to play this PM Dawn song, I'm not just going to sample the song. I'm going to take 2 or 3 days and completely make my own remix of that song to the point now I've got, oh my God, I've probably got close to 3,000 dance songs that I have remixed start to finish, so that when I do a DJ set, I'm not just going through different songs. Each song in its entirety is a DJ Yona remix from start to finish, where I've added my own parts to it. So it's not like your typical DJ where I'm just and I'm going through song banks, and now I'm going to play this song straight up and blend it into this song straight up, and I might add a few little drum noises, but generally that's it. Whereas I'm like taking the entire song and like completely remixing it. And so that's what's really cool, like with Karen and Jason and so many other people I've gotten to collaborate with. You know, Karen was the one that kept sending me samples and was like, oh, you got to remix this 3 Dog Night. And I'm like, hey, I'm game. Let's go back to the 70s. That's some of the best music. And, you know, the other eras, not so much. Not a big fan of a lot of the newer stuff, but there's also really good music out there as well. So I guess, let me see. I keep talking about it and talking about it, you know. Oh, wait, I've got the perfect thing here. I've tried to post on Twitter a Twitter-sized video, because I think it's 2 minutes and 20 seconds, maybe. You can put longer videos on Twitter, but they want you to pay money, and I ain't paying.
Right, yeah.
It used to just be 30 seconds, but it's supposed to be 2 minutes, 20 seconds. So I cut a clip down to the 2 minutes, and it still wouldn't let me post my bloated, fat JD Vance remix. And so what, you know, there are a number of songs that I've made that are very, very clearly meant to be political. But I try to make every political song so vague that if you're listening to it and you're a Trump fan, you're going to be dancing along to it.
Right.
If you're actually able to read between the lines and realize there's this thing called satire, then you're going to be laughing at Trump like I am and realizing that all the jokes are on him. So every single time I make a political song that features a politician, it's not to honor them. It is to ridicule them and laugh at them. But I try to do it in such a way so it's tasteful enough and innocuous enough that hopefully they'll get that it's just a joke. Well, with the bloated JD Vance, it goes in a different direction, because the whole bloated JD Vance thing, that's one of these AI memes where somebody got an AI computer to say, what would JD Vance look like if he was 350 pounds?
Right.
With a neck beard. And it's just funny. I mean, again, to me, nothing insults these pedophile, rapist, Satan worshiping elites, these broligarchs. They cannot stand to be laughed at. They cannot stand for the joke to be at their expense.
Right. It's still one of the powerful tools that we have, is as far as making fun of these people, like with your music or even good memes, things like that. They do have power for sure.
Let me find the little 2-minute clip, because I don't want to keep you up all night. And but at the same time, this is one of the most recent things that I've done. Let's see. Oh, it's bloated. It starts bloated. Yeah, of course.
Okay.
There it is. Bloated JD Clippy. Found it. Well, I'll finally get that. I didn't waste time making this.
You hate Mexicans?
This is the video Twitter did not want to let me upload. Funny.
Streets are exploding with drugs and violence.
I ripped the audio from two of his political ads for Ohio.
Are you a racist? Streets are exploding with drugs and violence. Are you a racist? Streets are exploding with drugs and violence. Do you hate Mexicans?
Do you hate Mexicans too? Hey, I'm going to be close to me. I'm a racist. Me all the way.
Hilarious. Him doing the Napoleon Dynamite dance really is, it's the best. It's top tier. Absolutely top tier. Okay,
That's
Yona.
why I do music, because it's fun. That's just good, clean fun right there.
It is good, clean fun. Alrighty. So where can people find you? I think everybody here knows where, but just in case they don't know, tell us where they can find you, watch your show, find your music, all that good stuff, support you, anything like that.
Awesome. Well, I definitely need some help right now. Anybody can help me. I'm on Bandcamp at Yona, HIGHYONA .bandcamp BANDCAMP.com. And most of my music on there I have listed for $0 for purchase. So, but you can elect to pay whatever you want for music on Bandcamp, and that goes to my PayPal. And that takes about a week to process. For those that want to instantly infuse the Yona with money to spend on my kids, now that's the Cash App and the Venmo and the PayPal type stuff. DJ Yona, HIGHYONA. DJ Yona is my Cash App and all that stuff. My main show is Peasants Podcast that I do on my Rumble channel under the same name, Peasants Podcast. Been doing the Peasants Podcast, Yona with the lower cast, for about 4 years, 4.5 years, almost 5 years. Coming up on my super duper 150th episode here, right concurrent with my 52nd birthday at the end of this month. So big show coming up there. And of course, for the last more than 100 for the last roughly 100 episodes, I've been with the New Prisoners Network, with Dave and Zoe and Tom and Harps and Steve and everybody else there. The main show is on Saturday nights, Saturday Night Anarchy, where we'll have Steve Poikinen from AM Wake Up and everybody else join in with the panels, and have a big nerdathon every Saturday night. And then, I mean, quite often you'll find me in the chat in at David Knight Show, or generally on Rumble, because I'm kind of holding a grudge against YouTube at this point. I'm very reluctant to ever share any of my content on YouTube anymore. And people would say that's my mistake. And everybody uses YouTube and everything else. Well, I don't care.
Yeah, and they're not, if they don't like your stuff, they're not promoting you anyway. Nobody's going to see
Right.
it unless they're actively going and searching for it. And then I agree, and they nuked many of your songs and channels before that. So,
and I'm also on Spotify and iTunes. I'm on Fountain XM. I'm on all these different websites. Shout out to my buddy Matt Finley down in Melbourne, Australia, another one of the artists I've helped collaborate and produce tracks with, and he has really helped me learn about Noster Client and how to sell my records for Bitcoins and how to upload on all of these other alternative Valueverse platforms. And again, every day I'm learning new stuff. It's just a constant learning curve. But thanks to that, like I've got to remember the name of this show, Mutton and Mead Music Hour, which I believe broadcasts out of Copenhagen, Denmark. We're gonna go with Denmark, Copenhagen.
yes.
He's played 2 of my songs. And in the last show that he had, I guess he was really feeling it, because I noticed that normally he would just introduce the songs, but apparently he has a keyboard in his studio, and it got to playing my song. And because he played Via Nova, and he started playing his keyboard along and was singing along and playing the keyboard along.
That's cool.
Really, really cool. And,
Yeah.
of course, when Matt told me that, he was like, "Hey, did you know you were on the radio again?" I was like, "Oh yeah, we're at Denmark." Oh, that's cool. Wow.
Very cool.
And so, like, I'm listening in and I'm waiting for him to hear what he says. How am I introduced? I'm like, "Oh, this is so cool. I'm going to be representing for West Virginia." And I'm getting all stoked. And like, it's going to say West Virginia. And like, this is hi Yona from United States of America. And then I'm like, whoa, now I got to like stand up and put my hand over my heart and say the pledge. Like, it's not, I'm like representing for the whole country now.
For the whole place. Yeah, that's awesome.
Wow. Like, that's wild, But, if the internet at the beginning was supposed to be this democracy, just like America, where the scale is not weighted and the tables are not tilted. And it was like that. I remember AOL and Google Talk groups. And, there was a time when the best content on YouTube would go viral every time.
Yes.
But that's not the case anymore.
Exactly. Totally shut down, managed. I mean, it's really bleak out there. Okay. So people know where to find you. I want to thank you so much for your time, Yona. I have loved this conversation, and I really appreciate you educating us and covering these topics. And I just wanted to let people know that Yona and I had talked about before our show, before we started today, that we may do another episode on what Yona referred to as MMIW. Do you want to tell them a little bit about what that is, and that we're going to just try to dedicate an entire episode to that and why that's so important to you?
Well, as I talked about Appalachia and the Cherokee tonight, I didn't really go too deep into the Trail of Tears and the genocide and the Cherokee War and the other Indian wars per se. I really wanted to try to keep it as brief as possible. I'm sorry about the length of the show, but I wanted to try to keep it just to Appalachia, and to try to hit most of, I think, the main points with Appalachia and bring it to modern context today, and how does that relate to where we are today and the struggles that we face today. But that being said, more particular to just Cherokee and Native American issues, First Nations and Indians in particular, is the context of genocide and the worldview that once you get a piece of paper that says you own that part of the Earth's surface, that you can now take that portion of the Earth's surface and completely, totally destroy it for the rest of all time and poison all your neighbors forever. And that somehow makes sense because you made $1. And it's just, it's mind-boggling. And so I think maybe we are reaching the point of the boiling water and the frog in the pot that I think people are starting to wake up to the flock cameras and the degradation of the quality of the food and water and the inflation of the food prices and the fact that very quickly it's going to be easy, so easy to get Americans to go to feeding centers. Call them food camps. And there's free trains to the food camps because no one can afford the food and you got to have somewhere to live and you got to have something to eat. And it's because the government's trying to help. That's all. Everyone's just going to the train stations to go to the camps because the government's trying to help. Wink, wink. And I mean, that's how every single tribe was put onto the reservation. They restrict your food. They restrict your access to water. They take away your animals. They take away your land. Oh, poor Indian. You hungry, bro? We got some food over here at the res. Come on over. And it's like a Roach Motel. It's a Hotel California. You can check in, but you can never leave. And they basically trying to turn the entire they basically have turned the entire United States into a Roach Motel at this point. In fact, I don't even think you can fly on a domestic airline flight without a passport or a federal real ID.
Right, the real ID.
Card.
Yep.
And they have the RFID and the passport. So at this point, if you are wanting to fly and use an airport in the United States, domestically or internationally, you have to have your RFID kill tag on you at all times. And that's what the RFID chip is for. Just like the SIM card in your cell phone. That's so that one day that killer drone can fall in love with your cell phone. It's going to be an explosive first kiss. And you'll be dead. And that's kind of where we're at. Skynet. We're pretty much at Skynet part of the story.
Yeah.
I hate to end on such a bleak note, but the truth is we still have to have water to drink and food to eat. Appalachia will always be an oasis of true freedom and independence because we're hard people that had to eke out hard living off of hard land.
Yes.
And that's why the Appalachians continue to be ridiculed and targeted for depopulation. To this day, it's an actual genocide being waged against West Virginians in particular ever since the Battle of Blair Mountain, Sacklers. And so we're going to go deeper into the genocide the next time around with MMIW and the whole reservation system and what does it mean to be Cherokee? Because there's Cherokee in all 50 states and U.S. territories. There's Cherokee living all around the world. Why did Cherokee have to live in the res? That's like telling every last Palestinian, get your ass back to the Gaza Strip, buddy. Who on earth would want to live at the Gaza Strip at this point? It's nothing but a bunch of rubble that's bombed every day. I mean, anyways, granted, Cherokee, North Carolina is not the Gaza Strip, but I mean, point being, we'll get into that next time around.
Yeah. It isn't, but this is where in my opinion, it needs to be talked out because there is money there, right? There is some autonomy for those people. But as you had mentioned earlier in our episode, there are catches to these things. and there's these social and cultural issues, and there's reasons that they are perhaps more severe in the reservation community than in other places. So we're going to get into that. It's a really important tie-in to this conversation, and you're a
I'm
wealth
looking
of
forward to that
knowledge.
because it
Yeah.
is, I feel like it deserves a show of its own simply because
Yes.
Native Americans are too often painted with one broad brush monochromatically. And, you've got all these different languages and cultures and ecosystems and traditions and
Everything.
there's a really fascinating pre-Columbian history as well of migrations. Prior to the arrival of the European empires, it was common for empires to stretch from South America to North America, from Central America all over, and for lines to just move back and forth. There was nomadic tribes that just moved. To this day, we have tribes that are straddling the border, like the Tohono O'odham in Arizona, that are on both sides of Trump's border wall. And, in that case, they're still speaking the same language on both sides of the border. Tohono, not English, not Spanish. So, and as I said before, there's Seminoles, Kickapoos. There's actually Cherokee and Kickapoo reservations in Mexico, as well as the United States, because we fled the United States before. So, in fact, Sequoyah himself died at the res in Mexico. So, this whole thing of fighting colonialism, fighting empire, fighting and struggling against genocide, I view, to me, the greatest act of genocide is destroying the land. Because that's not just an act of genocide against the living, whether they're elderly, man, woman, or child. When you destroy the land, you destroy all the future unborn generations that will never, ever be able to live there in the future. You've now made part of the planet Earth uninhabitable to humans. Congratulations. How much money did you make? So that's the show to come.
Yep, for sure. Well, thank you so much for your time. I think the people that joined us, I think that they really liked it, and I have loved it. So thank you so much, everybody. I hope that you did enjoy the show and the conversation. I hope you learned something. I did. And a quick favor, please like the show, leave a comment, share with somebody who may find it interesting. Those are the ways that you can help support this program. And definitely check out Yona's work and consider supporting him as well, either through Bandcamp or Cash App, Venmo, PayPal, any of those things. And just thank you for being here, whether you're listening later or you've been with us this whole time in the live chat. We really appreciate it. And Yona, thank you again. And we will see y'all later. Bye-bye.
Good night. Wait, don't get negado. Tag safety.